Who's vice chairman? What's that?
We'll see. You take over.
All right.
Have you heard him now?
Huh?
Have you heard him?
Oh, yeah. I don't recall him telling me he couldn't be here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Peoples. I'm the planning director. I serve as the secretary of the Plan Commission. President of the Plan Commission is out. We haven't elected a vice chairman, so we'll do that here fairly soon. But the first thing we're going to do is a call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd all rise and face the front there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call.
Catherine Radford,
Here.
Paul Gutenberger,
Here.
Bill Reed,
Here.
Grant Niemeyer,
Here.
Ed Rosenbaum. Here. James Petrita.
We have a quorum. President is absent. I'm going to add an item on the agenda if there is no objection. That's the election of a vice chairman of the Plan Commission. Do we have anybody that would like to nominate someone as vice chairman of the Plan Commission? Oh, please, somebody.
I nominate Grant Niemeyer.
We have a nomination for Grant Niemeyer as vice chairman of the Plan Commission. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any objection? Any other nominations for vice chairman of the Plan Commission? All right, with a nomination and a second, all in favor of Grant Niemeyer as the vice chairman of the Plan Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. That motion, you've just been elected the vice chairman of the Plan Commission, and I will gladly hand this gavel over to you. Oh, there should be the thing. Let me get that. What's up?
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
We're done.
Welcome to the Avon Advisory Planning Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda. Hold on first. Can everybody hear me? Okay. In having a copy of the agenda or the staff reports, they're available on the tables to the right of the audience. We'll be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As vice president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. The meeting is being recorded for public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum. All cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls taken outside of the chambers. If you're interested in commenting during the public hearing, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. Responses to the public comments will be given once the hearing is closed. We do understand that there are several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you do not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please, well, we've already stand for the pledge allegiance. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the November 22nd, 2021 hearing.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from the November 22nd, 2021 meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Are there any committee reports? I guess the Board of Zoning Appeals did meet this week, and it did hear one case, and it was a pool.
It was a request for a waiver on a swimming pool, and we had heard this case at least once, and at that time, there were only 4 members present, so it was a tied vote. And so then we heard an abbreviated request for arguments for appeal, and this time the request for waiver was denied on a 3-2 vote.
So it was a Board of Zoning Appeals Development Commission.
Redevelopment Commission did meet this evening. In addition to approving several invoices, we also approved our 2022 meeting schedule and had a look at the developer agreement for Avon Landing, as well as Resolution 2021-08 for the right-of-way acquisition for Dan Jones Road.
And I think that the third one is usually the town council. And I attended the town council meeting, but there wasn't a lot there other than the approval of the holiday schedule and the salary ordinance at the last meeting. Moving on to the requests for continuances or agenda modifications, you do have 3 items on your agenda that are a request for a continuance or a withdrawal. And the first item on the agenda, PUD 2101, the Althoff Homes Plan Unit Development, which was a group of 150 townhomes located along 200 North, just east of County Road 900 East. The petitioner did file a withdrawal of that petition. So the Plan Commission merely needs to acknowledge the withdrawal of PUD 2101, Althoff Homes PUD. The second item on the request for continuance is a DPR 2116 Rise Avon LLC. And this was a development plan, or this is a development plan review petition to build a self-storage and flex space buildings along Ronald Reagan corridor. The petitioner in this particular case has added additional acreage to this request. And that acreage must first come through to you as subject of a rezoning petition. And then they need to do a primary and secondary subdivision request on that, because the lots that they're adding are portions of platted lots in a minor subdivision. So the staff is requesting a continuance to March 28th, 2022, to allow the petitioner sufficient time to do the rezoning petitions and the primary subdivision request, which hopefully you'll see in the February meeting.
I'll make a motion to continue DPR 2116 until the March 28, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Zoning Amendment 2107, Unified Development Ordinance. This is a request for replacement zoning and subdivision control ordinance. In this particular instance, this is me, the planning director, bringing this petition before you. And we've done several reviews and amendments and everything, and we've got a legal review that has been done a couple times. And our attorney highlighted three things that probably need to be incorporated into the ordinance. Regulations for small cell facilities to distinguish them from the huge monopole antennas and lattice tower antennas. Combined feeding operations in the agricultural district and agricultural overlay districts, and solar farms in the industrial and probably agricultural districts. So we are requesting a continuance to January 24th, the next meeting, to research and incorporate these standards into the proposed ordinance. We should be able to have that done, and then we should be able to have that done the next couple of weeks, and then get a draft copy to you electronically like I did last time that has those standards incorporated into it. But we would ask that you continue this to January 24th, 2022.
I move that we continue ZA 2107 Unified Development Ordinance to the January 24th, 2022 regularly scheduled meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This is the moment on the agenda where we provide for public comment. At this particular instance, the public may comment on any item that is not appearing on the agenda. And so if there's anybody in the audience who would like to say anything to the Plan Commission on an agenda or on an item that's not located on the agenda, this is the opportunity to do that now. Seeing none, we'll close that section of the agenda and we'll move on to any introductions. The staff doesn't have any. Does the Plan Commission have any introductions or anything like that? All right, old business, PUD 2103 Easton Gray Planned Unit Development. This is a request for approval of a planned unit development to develop housing options and a pedestrian mixed use town center with interconnected commercial, residential, and civic uses and a network of both passive and active recreational amenities. This is a 487 acre parcel located north of US 36 on the south side of County Road 100 North and east of County Road 500 East. Let's see if this works. Of course. Working now? All right. All right, this petition was introduced to the Plan Commission at its November 22nd, 2021 meeting. The petitioner had the opportunity to do a presentation and to familiarize a Plan Commission with the proposed development, to receive guidance from the Plan Commission regarding the perceived positive and negative aspects of the petition, and to provide an opportunity to the public to view and comment on the proposal. And this was done at that meeting. This is a request to rezone nearly 487 acres from C3, R1, R1A, and R2 to the Planned Unit Development Zoning District to provide for a mixed-use planned unit development consisting of 6 distinct parts: a neo-traditional mixed-use town center, which is Area A and it's 71 acres, four distinct sections of traditional single-family residential development, which are areas B, C, D, and E, for a total of 234 acres, and then a large age-restricted community on the west side of the development named Area F, and that is 182 acres. The future land use cluster map of the comprehensive plan recommends approximately 13%. Oh, the exhibit you show up there is the current layout of zoning for the property. So the planned unit development is the blue line. And then C3 on the near the 36 frontage, followed by R1 and then R1A and R2 back behind it. This shows the development plan proposed and on file right now, showing the town center near the 36, near the area zone C3 right now. And then layering north from that, the 4 distinct residential communities going north. And then on the west side of the development, that's the age-restricted community, the 187 acres there. The comprehensive plan does, the future land use cluster map of the comprehensive plan recommends about 13% of the site for a town center and 32% of the site for specialty housing. The remaining 55% of the property has no real overt land use recommendation. The purpose of the town center recommendation is to create a vibrant central gathering spot for the Avon community by crafting a lively mixed-use development district. And the purpose of the specialty housing recommendation is to provide for a variety of desirable housing options that move beyond the simple single-family detached and attached model. This is the excerpt from the comprehensive plan showing how the town center recommendation in red and the specialty housing recommendation wrapping around the town center recommendation in yellow, with the balance of the property, about 55% of the property being in no overt recommendation. When there is not an overt recommendation from the plan, the staff has a couple options that they use. Typically, we would consider the underlying zoning as the appropriate and planned use for the site. In this instance, about half of the area is zoned R2 and the other half is zoned R1A. And these are single-family residential districts with a typical density of about 3.0 and 2.4 units respectively. So the plan, therefore, if it acknowledges the existing zoning, would recommend single-family residential land uses for this site. And the approximate density of that area would be right around 720 dwelling units an acre based upon the underlying zoning recommendations. It should be noted that the plan really doesn't have any specific guidance for typical densities in either the town center or specialty housing areas of the site. But since the town center is a mixed-use district and the specialty housing recommendation is for development other than single family, we've typically said that the typical densities in these areas, housing densities, should be a little bit higher. Moving on to the thoroughfare plan. The thoroughfare plan does designate the County Road 100 North and County Road 500 East as arterial streets, secondary arterials, and County Road 75 North as it goes through the site as a collector street. Both the map 11 and the map 12, map 11 being the thoroughfare plan, map 12 being missing segments or connectivity opportunities map, does show connectivity opportunities by extending County Road 75 North, east, west through the development, and by extending County Road 600 East, north, south through the development. And this shows, this is an excerpt from the thoroughfare plan that you show up here, showing how the thoroughfare plan, right up through here, extending 600 through the site, and then extending 75 East. Now, 75 East does move through this site. It goes right here, up to here, and then down through there. This recommendation of a connectivity opportunity right here would be a bit difficult to achieve because these two developments, subdivisions, abut one another. So to actually extend this street through this, we would have to take a line of single-family residential developments. In speaking with the town manager, he didn't feel that this alignment was feasible maybe in the future, some alignment like this, connecting these two streets through a S curve of some sort is feasible. But these recommendations are feasible. And the plan that you see before you does accommodate connecting through the town center and around the development up here to the existing 600. The petitioner has submitted a traffic study as part of the approval process. The plan does show that certain levels of service, that the level of service at certain intersections will degrade, specifically, and it's easier to show them on here. So the AM peak, there'll be some degradation of service up here at 600 and 100 North. There'll be some degradations here and here along the 36 corridor. The arrows show that are on there show the travels, the direction of travel that is affected according to the thoroughfare plan. So these are the 4 intersections that are affected in a adverse manner by the development, where you see a degradation in service. And during the PM peak, it's reduced to 3, right here, right here, right here, 100 North, and then down here at Main, 2 intersections down at Main Street. And then there's the sections of 75 North and County Road 600 East, and that's the area that's shown here in orange on both maps. Those streets exist, but they're not really constructed. They're really old chip and seal roads that have been sort of slowly morphed into a fairly modern road, but not modern to current town standards, but modern at least being paved. And the travel lanes are fairly narrow on these sections of road. They are not constructed to a standard that would really accommodate the anticipated traffic by this development. And the current proposal before you really doesn't mitigate this deficiency. We did meet with the petitioner, the town manager, and the public works director. We are trying to come up with some sort of capital improvements plan. And ultimately, that is something that probably we need to do. Now, the idea behind the capital improvements plan is to do a mid to long-term plan showing how we're going to accommodate some improvements to the intersection, these sets of intersections that have been negatively impacted, at least will be negatively impacted by this development, and degrade the level of service. Now, it should be noted, according to the transportation or the traffic study, that these degradations will not be what are termed unacceptable levels of service, Ds and Fs, but it goes from, say, like an A and a C. And I mean, I know that's sort of jargon, but those are still, C is still an acceptable level of service, but the idea from the town's perspective is that we would like to maintain the level of service at the existing level of service, if at all possible. As you can probably guess, there are some complications. So that road right there, a section of this road is under the county's jurisdiction. So we have to do some jurisdiction coordination. And of course, US 36 is within the towns or within the jurisdiction of the Indiana Department of Transportation. So it's not as easy as doing doing capital improvements plan and executing it. We would have to do a capital improvements plan and then coordinate with multiple jurisdictions to make some of these improvements happen. So this is going to be a sort of a long-term project that the Public Works Department would take on. From the standpoint of just overall, the development is consistent, at least from the position of the staff, with the comprehensive plan as a recommendation. You saw it up there. Town center near the 36 corridor, surrounded by higher density housing, higher density sort of non-traditional single-family residential housing, multifamily. So you do have a section of traditional sort of multifamily, you do have townhomes in the town center. You do have a mixed-use buildings that include ground floor residential and retail, or a ground floor commercial and residential above it for 2 and 3 stories. And you do have a civic component to that town center. And then the traditional single-family residential is largely in the area where the plan does recommend single-family residential. So we would argue that the plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It is a transformative development, so you couldn't necessarily say that it's consistent with the character of the area, because it's really in a rural area that's largely rural. Having said all that, we do recommend that the Plan Commission hold an additional public hearing on this petition to update you on any information that's happened in the preceding month. But we ultimately believe that it's appropriate to forward a favorable recommendation to the town council, subject to one condition, and that is that the developer shall continue to coordinate with us, the county, and the Indiana Department of Transportation, formulate a mid to long-term capital improvements plan in order to mitigate insufficient roadways and the degradation of service as a result of this development prior to secondary approval of the planned unit development. From the town manager's perspective, I think that what he said to me was that the council really is the one that needs to take into consideration the traffic and transportation impacts of the development. Now, it should be noted that the developer has multimodal in here, or multimodal in terms of a suburban development anyway, which includes pedestrian facilities, obviously roadways for cars, but also there's trails and other sorts of things that are for golf carts and other alternative transportation things. So there are opportunities here for many modes of transportation. Finally, I guess just to sum up, we do recommend approval subject to the one commitment and condition there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So Bill, I got one question on the roads. When you say that there'd be impacts there, what would be some methods that would address that? We're looking at more lanes, a roundabout?
It could be as simple as a turn lane, but yeah, it could be as complex as a roundabout. And one of the things to keep in mind, obviously, from the town's perspective, is the developer is only responsible for a share of the traffic, right? They're not going to. We're not asking them to install a roundabout or build a roundabout at some of these roads, but what we are asking for up front is, what do we need to do to bring this back to the level of service, or at least close to the level of service it is right now? And then we can figure out how we're going to pay for it, because these are ultimately long. When you think that this is going to be a development that goes on for 7 to 10 years, and then these impacts are going to happen over a long period of time, it gives us a chance to, do a planning, get it to the Indianapolis MPO for maybe some cost sharing, other sorts of things, to make a determination on what the share of for instance, what share of the developer's responsibility. We don't have that information right now, and that's what the town manager is trying to figure out. But it could be, like I said, it could be as simple as a turn lane. It could be as complex as a roundabout.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to follow up. If we're looking at 100 North, the property on the north side of that street, I think we can all anticipate that, especially once this happens, will be the next logical target for development. And so I would assume that not just those intersections, but the anticipated future use of 100 North along that stretch and further west is also going to be considered by the town.
Yeah, we do factor in some background growth from our sister municipalities and development in the county when we put these traffic impact studies together. or at least when we asked the developer to put these traffic impact studies together. So yeah, 100 North will transition to an arterial street that's a little bit more heavily used than it is right now. That much is clear. I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
So Bill, could you help me define derogation of service a little bit more? Does that mean traffic's going to back up there more, or left-hand turns be more difficult? Can you just define a little bit more for me, derogation of service?
Yeah.
What traffic studies is coming up with?
Probably should have tabbed that part. I actually had it highlighted. So a level of service is usually defined as a delay for an amount of time. So based on the study, a level of service of A has a delay at any one of these intersections of less than or equal to 10 seconds per vehicle. So they'll get up there, get to the stop sign, maximum 10 seconds or under, they're out of there. As the service degrades, it goes to 10, basically between 10 and 15 at an unsignalized intersection, 10 to 20 at a signalized intersection, and so on. Level of service D would be about 15 to 25 for an unsignalized intersection, and then 20 to 35 seconds at a signalized intersection. If you're waiting greater than 50 seconds or greater than 50 seconds at an unsignalized intersection or greater than 80 seconds at a signalized intersection, that's considered a fail or an F, and that's an unacceptable level of service. Now, none of these intersections have degraded to an F. The PM peak at, say, 100 North and 600 East goes from a B to a D. On the westbound approach, southbound approaches of Main Street and 500 East, they go from like a C, which is the current, to a D with the background and well, for the traffic associated with this development. Main Street at County Road 525 at the PM peak goes from a C to a D. So we're usually looking at a degradation in service, dropping from basically a B to a C, or from the worst case probably was the southbound approach from US 36 to County Road 571 East. At the AM peak, degraded from an A to a C. With the development. So basically triples the wait time at that location.
So are we anticipating any stoplights being added at this point in time? Is that
We-
given, or is that still to be determined?
Yeah, we're not anticipating stoplights. We're anticipating moving the stoplight from where it exists right now, where Main Street connects into 36, and move it over to the main entrance of this development. And we're talking to, or the developer is negotiating with the Indiana Department of Transportation to make that happen.
Moving it north.
Moving it east.
Gotcha.
So it's it's
Okay.
currently at,
It's the entry to the Riverwalk
right.
section.
It would be entry to the Riverwalk, and we would do some sort of improvements at the other intersection to keep left turn lanes from happening at that location. But that's really something between the developer and DOT and us. This development does extend Main Street through it. So that through traffic from Main Street coming through this development and then connecting to that new signal on 36. But that's the only signal. That's the only real signalization using a light. Most of it, we're looking at capacity improvements, such as addition of turn lanes or construction of roundabout. We don't know what it is. So that was, the outcome of the meeting was, okay, we need to know what we need to do first, and then we need to figure out how much it's gonna cost. And then we need to figure out, then we need to assign costs. Are we gonna bite the bullet and take most of that cost, or is there gonna be some cost sharing involved? But we're at the point where we don't really even know the improvements that need to be made to bring it back to the level of service it's currently operating at.
How can we not anticipate that? I can't believe that in the many, many, many years and hundreds of thousands of developments that have been done, that nobody has been able to look at development of X amount of homes on X amount of roads and to be able to anticipate this is what it's going to mean for traffic.
We do. I mean, that's what we're asking the developer to provide
Oh,
us.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
So that's,
my understanding, if I recall correctly from the petitioner, is that all of this was going to be developed all at once. I mean, there's going to be the age-restricted housing and the townhomes and the estate homes. They're going to start building in all of those sections all at the same time. So you're going to have multiple parts that are going to be growing at the same time, which means all of these intersections are going to start to be impacted at the same time.
I think that, yeah.
I mean, I can certainly be corrected on that, but that's what I remember hearing.
Yeah, I think from the town side, what we believe is going to happen is the town center is going to develop first, and then some of the age-restricted community. But I wouldn't anticipate, like I said, I would think full build-out somewhere between 7 to 12 years, depending on the market conditions. So yeah, you're right. I mean, there will be a point in the future where the portions, at least, of the entire community under construction. But I would not anticipate that we're going to have the whole thing sort of developed out in couple years, 5 years, and all of these impacts are going to occur in the relatively near term. I think our anticipation is, like I said, full build out somewhere between 7 and 12 years after.
But we
after it's
certainly would not
constructed.
wait that long to get these intersections improved.
No, we won't. It depends on the cost of the intersection
Well,
improvements. Yeah. I mean, if it's something as simple as increasing capacity through a turn lane or some sort of configuration that allows it better through traffic, that's something we could probably do near term. But if we're talking about a roundabout, that's something we probably needs to get on the ERTIP, the Regional Transportation Plan, so that we can get federal funds to help us construct that thing. And if that's the case, that would take longer.
Okay.
Because we probably won't have the funding necessary to develop a roundabout at one of these intersections without bringing in the Indianapolis MPO and the federal government to help us out with cost sharing.
In addition to the improvements that we're discussing, what about let's say there's some damage to the roads that are currently inadequate, the weight load and so on. Is that going to be up to the developer to maintain some of that damage that's done to the roads, or is the town going to absorb that?
The damage caused by like construction traffic
Yeah,
or,
trucks, cement trucks. so
well, we do a
on.
pretty good job of maintaining, I mean, we do a pretty good job in development. Matter of fact, we have someone in Public Works whose sole purpose is to go out and make sure that the roads are properly, cleaned and those sorts of things.
I was just talking about like the chip and seal roads that aren't capable of handling that additional construction traffic.
Yeah, I think what we try to do is bring everything in through the like the main roads. I don't think we want to bring a lot of construction traffic in off of 100 north into 300 or 600 east and bring it through there, because those roads simply wouldn't be able to handle it. So my understanding is, yeah, I mean, 500 probably would be fine, but it would be something that we would monitor.
Okay.
And our Public Works Department would probably have to, I mean, I think it's the ultimate answer to your question is it's probably going to be some of each, if it's something that's been caused by the development, they would probably have to fix it. But if it's something that's just a normal degradation, just something the town would have to go out there and fix.
Mhm.
So Bill, on that, near the 75 North, you had those dotted lines that there's a new street that was going in, if I understood you correctly.
The,
Could you bring that back up?
thing back on there.
Map 11 or 12.
Yeah, right there, those dotted lines, let's see, right there, the dotted lines are there.
So who's doing that work?
That would be the developer is going to do, that work.
So that's in addition to the roads that are already there for 75 North, right?
Right, so the road system that flows through there really is, it comes in off of here, comes in here and does a 90, and goes down here and down through there. So that's the existing road system that's in.
After the resident presented last month, I went and drove in front of his house.
Mm-hmm,
Fairly narrow is not a right term. It's narrow.
right.
I mean, it's bad. And there's a lot of 90-degree turns left and right. I don't see any way without doing that. There's no way I can see that you can work 75 North because it's like a state park. It's like driving Brown County. I mean, it's those roads are that type.
Yeah,
You can't handle residential traffic. So
Yeah, I actually concur. I drove it as well. And it's a really, now, the current plan has, well, it's better to actually show you the current. Is right there. Oops. So it does come in, it's sort of hard to see from my side, but it would come in here and then swing around here and do that. So that you see this as being that missing segment, for lack of a better term. But the plan currently basically uses the existing road systems right here and here. Now, the town had the school reconstruct this road, so probably right about up to there. And then, of course, from here to here, it's all pretty much a very narrow road section.
So show the dotted lines part now with your highlighter. Show where the dotted lines are going to go.
Okay, I wouldn't be able to show it on that one. The best I could do is basically show you that and sort of toggle back and forth. Well, wait a
Okay,
minute.
show me where the person's
Maybe
house is.
that-
I'm trying to get the definition where the person's house is to the new roads.
Oh, it's, his house is located right here.
Okay.
And so the new
We're
road,
going to improve that road going up to 100 North then. That's part of the developer's job.
well, that's currently it's not. Currently, this road is not shown as being reconstructed. Now that
Okay.
is
So
one
that's-
of the,
that's something we need to talk about then.
yeah, that is one of the key sort of issues. This and this road right in through here, these intersection degradations, that is basically the town saying, well, what do we need to do? And there's courses of action that we're going through to try to develop, say, I mean, I think that 600 here will need to be widened. What we do with 75 North here, it's really in the purview of Public Works and the town manager to try to figure out what the proper course is, and then figure out how we're going to pay for it. But that's
Okay.
I mean, that's the quandary we're sort of in with the development is really good, but it does, like every development, have negative aspects, and the negative aspects in this one are largely related to the supporting transportation system because it's in the fringes of the town.
I'm not worried about Rockville Road. I'm a big believer in Highway 36 and Rockville Road. I think it handles traffic great. I'm not worried about 500 East either. I think it's straight. It's got a good road, but man, that 75 North's troublesome. So I'll wait until to have further discussion on it.
So now I have a follow-up on that discussion. So as part of the rezone, we can ask for commitments
Yes.
of the developer. And while you've asked to put a condition on the motion here to work with long-term planning, is this something where you would like to help or ask for us to get the commitment to address roads immediately that we know? I mean, when we're talking about these roads here, getting commitments to address that as part of putting in the PUD, is that something that we ought to be considering?
That's definitely something you can consider. The only caveats that I would have to that is that it's beyond my sort of level of expertise. So you're looking at transportation infrastructure, and while I've done thoroughfare plans and those sorts of things. I've never really gotten into the day-to-day operation or the details, because I always had a public works director whose job it was.
Well, I think we've got somebody in the audience that might be able to help us later, that if they're willing to come forward, we can talk about roads. So I'll save questions for later.
Okay. Yeah. You want to take over? Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Next is public petition. Okay, if the petitioner would like to come to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Hi, good evening. Sean McInnes with Republic Development. I'm at 13578 East 131st Street, Suite 200 in Fishers, 46037. I have with me this evening from Republic Development, Larry Moon and Doug Wagner. From Banning Engineering, we have Jeff Banning and Jason Coyle, and our traffic engineer from A&F Engineering, Steve Fairbach, who's here to answer lots of traffic questions that you may have. We feel like we gave a pretty in-depth presentation last month. So on the heels of Bill's presentation, we'd like just to offer that we're here to answer questions and to address any concerns you may have.
Who is the anticipated utility provider, electrical provider for this?
I believe it's Duke. Oh, Duke and Hendricks Power. Okay, it's both.
So it would be both.
Mhm.
And has there been any conversation about incorporating solar panels or any other kind of clean energy, working with the two utility providers into these buildings?
Behind the scenes, there have been, I mean, we discuss it about, in particular, our multi-use buildings where you may have opportunities for rooftop, the ability to put solar panels, but it's a little early in the process right now for that.
So that is,
Real
but
detail.
that is part of the conversation.
It's part of the conversation along with electric charging stations and other things that,
And what about the allowing residential properties to have solar panels?
I don't believe we have any restrictions in the zoning. Bill, you may.
I mean, we tend to consider them an accessory use, but this is one of those issues that when our attorney reviewed the upcoming UDO, found a weak spot in our ordinance. And so we need to fix that. And that's one of the things we're going to do in the future.
Okay,
But from our standpoint, what we tend to consider them as just an accessory use, as long as they meet the standards for like a typical garage or shed or anything, we as long as they meet the setbacks,
swimming pool.
we issue permits, right?
And there are statutes on what you can do. The town is very limited what it could restrict. I mean, in general, under the new statutes, solar is encouraged and there's certain statutes.
I was thinking there had been a change, but I couldn't remember specifically what it
There's
was.
Change about solar use for your own home.
Right.
And so that's one issue. And then the other issue, solar farms would be if 10 acres of this were to be dedicated for some sort of, it's really just power generation for the utility. It's not kept on site. That's a whole different issue. But in
Right,
terms
right.
of a person wanting to build a home with solar power, that's generally allowed under the new statute. So I wouldn't, I'm not concerned about that. I mean, if someone wants to do that, they have the right to do, with some limitation, they have the right to do that.
Okay.
So, and I apologize, I'm going to ask a question I was going to ask last month, but I was not able to attend. So in the commercial development, if I read the plans right, is there plans for just one major restaurant? I mean, that's kind of the concept right now.
The concept is for one standalone restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of an iconic building, something that we would want to find something that's not typically, on US 36. It may be local or regional restaurant, a concept that could have a really cool building.
Right.
And, you want something that can have lines. We'll have several spots within the mixed use, the first floor commercial for restaurants, coffee shops, things like that as well.
Okay. And I mean, I think the comment I had written for last month, and I'll say it this month too, is I like the plan. I think this would be a really good addition to Avon. It's good. It feels like we're talking about traffic and everything. We talk about traffic. So just dealing with that. But I thought the plans and the information was very well done.
Thank you.
And if I recall last time, and I may be misremembering this, but there was going to be an emphasis on locally owned businesses going into the retail and commercial space, correct?
That is correct. And that's part of the secret sauce in our mindset, that you need to have local, authentic shops, whether they're retail or restaurants. That's what really makes a town center, look and feel like a community and not just like it's next to a mall somewhere.
Mhm.
So to address one of your earlier questions, just while I'm thinking about it, as far as the phasing of the project, I did tell you the last time we do anticipate starting every section all at once, but it'll be a handful of lots, in each section as we go. So every section will start at the same time, but as Bill indicated, this is a 7 to 10 year build out before each one of them is completed.
You ready for traffic questions?
Sure, I'll introduce Steve Fairbach from A&F to field those questions for you.
Well, part of my issue is coming here today. I almost T-boned a car coming out of Costco, out not at the light, but a block west of the light. And they wanted to turn left, which they can't because there's a meridian, but you can't hardly see it. And we almost T-boned him, but fortunate enough, he put it in reverse and backed up and realized he couldn't turn left and he's going to have to turn right coming out of that. So all that being said, I mean, traffic's just important in Rockville. Again, you have to be careful, but I really am concerned about 75 North. And I guess my first question is, I'm trying to look at the map, and that's why I was having Bill try to point it to me, because it curves around, does a lot of turns, and then it does an abrupt turn to go north to 100 North.
Mhm.
And that looks like because of trees, I can't see it on my map where it goes north, but that looks like it's outside of your development area. So that's a county road that's out. So then how can we make you responsible for something that's outside the land that you are developing? I guess that's my first question.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer on how you can do it, but I can tell you as a developer, we want to be responsible neighbors and responsible to the community. So we've been working with the town, with the staff, and with our engineers to come up with ways to help, whether that be through some sort of contribution I think he called it capital improvements plan, some contribution to that, or some other way that may work to make those roads function. We've looked at 2 or 3 different options. I think Steve is studying some now. I know that Banning is laying different things out that we want to present both to the town and also to Mr. Downing, the resident who lives there, that raised the concerns in the last meeting. So we're working through those right now. But as far as whether or not the town has the ability to compel us to do that, we're not certain, but we want to help.
Is there anything you think you can do? I mean, you're in a tight, I'm for the project. I'm for what you guys are attempting to do. I just want to put that out up front. But with the school there on the north side, I mean, it's just, you just have a lot of things, a lot of obstacles to work against.
Mhm.
Is there any way that as you develop the different regions and the homes and lay out the roads that you can kind of emphasize the flow to go to 500 East and to Rockville Road versus the flow going to 100 North? I guess that's another option. Again, I don't know how, I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do that, but you definitely, I think, if you can, make the flow go to 500 East and to Rockville Road or 36 if possible. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Would someone like to make a motion? We ready? Oh, okay. Sorry.
I do have one more question. Have you guys driven, I assume you've driven that area, right? Have you driven it?
Many times, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Public comment?
Yeah, public comment period for it.
Okay. Is there anybody signed up?
Fellas over there. Ryan Waffen. Is it on green?
No, it's on red.
Yeah, I've been needing it first.
All right, so that works, right? Mr. Chairman, I would ask, according to Section 9 of the Plan Commission rules, anyone representing an organization gets 5 minutes instead of 3. So I would ask your consent for that.
Is the staff?
Okay.
Yep.
Can you state your name and address?
Absolutely. Ryan Wathen, 1480 Laurel Oak Drive, Avon, Indiana, 46123. I'm representing the Coalition for Responsible Growth. The Eastern Grade development has been described as transformative for Avon. I completely agree with that. It is the largest development to come before this Plan Commission, and as such deserves significant scrutiny and a deep dive into the details. This is not something to be voted on without a lot of explanation. While overall I support the concept of this well-packaged PUD, which should bring additional positive tax revenue, there are 3 areas of concern that I want you to consider. First is the TIF district request and the incomplete fiscal study. Republic Development has requested TIF district financing for both the commercial section and also a portion of the largest neighborhood, the age-restricted block. To my knowledge, Avon has never approved a TIF district for new single-family residential, and I'm not sure that's a Pandora's box we want to open. As for the commercial area, a TIF serves to actually reduce some of the business tax revenue that we were hoping to generate from this development. I see that as a problem also. Avon's PUD submission criteria requires a financial impact study to be submitted with each PUD. Unfortunately, the impact study submitted for East and Gray specifically excludes the TIF districts in its calculations. So it is impossible to know how this will affect the overall tax burden in our town. The TIF was probably not included because of right now there's no hard numbers to work with. It is ambiguous and conceptual. For a project this magnitude, we can't fly blind. We need hard data. A financial impact study which disregards the large requested TIF districts is simply incomplete and does not meet the submission requirement. Please require more information on this TIF impact before voting to proceed. Secondly, traffic problems, as we just discussed, and more importantly, uncertainty regarding the solutions of those. Avon's ordinance for PUDs requires you to consider the question of whether a PUD will unduly burden adjacent roadways. As of today, the answer to that question is yes, it will. The traffic studies clearly show multiple intersections and roads which will suffer degradation of service, but the staff report and what we've just seen basically punts on this issue by saying, oh, the town and the developer will work all this out later. That's just unacceptable for a development of this size at this point in the process. If you take action tonight, it starts a 45-day clock under which the town council has to act. Therefore, you'll be placing the burden of solving those traffic problems on them over the next month and a half. Let's come up with some solutions and work together before we kick this can down the road to the town council. Last, I would ask about codifying additional architectural standards. Republic Development does very nice work. I recently went up and toured their Saxony facility, or Saxony development, up off 69 in Noblesville. By Fishers, it's Noblesville Fishers. I was very impressed. I encourage all of you to go up there and look at it. The variety of houses, the landscaping, the quality of the neighborhoods is unlike anything we have in Avon. I believe that they have every intention to do the same quality here. However, the PUD zoning, once approved, is attached to the land itself. Therefore, were Republic to sell off a part of this land, a new developer would only have to abide by the minimum standards contained in the PUD. Let's incorporate some additional architectural requirements based on the new draft UDO and some items that are in their Saxony project to ensure consistency even if portions of this land are sold off. Costco, I use Costco as an example. Costco was a transformative project for Avon. It was approached slowly and deliberately by the Plan Commission, taking several meetings to completely vet all the details and ensure the Costco building matched Avon's approach to improving the architecture on 36. In the end, it was worth it. We ended up with a very nice looking building. It was your thorough, attentive, cooperative approach produced that quality building that both the town and the petitioner can be very proud of. I would simply ask you to take the same thorough approach to this project.
John Schulte.
Hey, good evening. My name is John Schulte, 157 Pinedale Drive, Avon, Indiana, 46123. I'm a property owner in Avondale Heights, which is adjacent to the proposed development. And my family and I have a couple of concerns about the requests for the commission and the council to take into consideration as the development moves forward. We're simply requesting that the proposed landscape buffer between sections A and B and the properties on Pinedale Drive be increased in feet and the density of the proposed plantings be increased. According to the plan, directly behind our property, there will be an alley parking for the proposed townhomes. And that proposed landscape buffer that is currently in place includes some bushes and a couple of trees, which will not be sufficient to block out the increased noise and vehicle lights. A denser and wider landscape buffer would address those issues. And finally, we're requesting that the Planning Commission and the Town Council consider the proposed housing density of Section F on the plan and the effect that it would have on traffic. Avondale Heights has only one entrance in and out of that neighborhood. With the increased traffic from the proposed town center and the 400 plus homes in Section F, getting in and out of the Avondale Heights neighborhood could be extremely difficult. Not only that, but this will affect school buses that enter the neighborhood to pick up and drop off students. Perhaps part of the mitigating the mitigation of the impact on traffic would be to simply decrease the number of homes being built in Section F. Thanks for your time.
There's no others, nobody else has signed up to speak, but definitely take additional comments if anybody wishes to speak.
Is there any additional comments?
I have a question for Mr. Taylor. The consideration of the TIF funding, and actually I kind of had a similar concern about using TIF funding for residential, but that's not something that would be before the Planning Commission, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So just for the purposes of those here, who does make that determination of the TIF and how it works?
Both the redevelopment commission primarily makes that determination. They are the body that has the ability to declare areas that are eligible for TIF financing. It also requires the approval of the town council, so there would be two bodies that would have to approve it. And then depending on what is proposed in terms, if this, one would guess that there might be a TIF bond used to construct the infrastructure necessary. It would require the council's commission of property tax or other tax backups or other revenue backups for the bonds. So those are very involved determinations, require several public hearings. It's not this hearing. If there is a TIF district created, the Planning Commission's role in that would be, it would circle right back around to you. And the question for you is whether the proposed development is consistent with your comprehensive plan. So again, in this case, this is now already before you, you're familiar with it, but sometimes TIFs are created without that. And so there is a requirement in the statute that the Planning Commission has to sign off on it as well. So, and then the town council has to approve your determination. So if we move in that direction, if the town moves in that direction, then there would be significant involvement by your RDC, your town council. You would have some role, but not on the financial side. And then the town could also could involve its Economic Development Commission in the participation of that process as well. Not required, but sometimes happens. But Catherine's right. It's just, they're kind of lanes that everybody has about these issues. And again, that's not really not really the planning commission's job to do that. You have other roles that are really important, but just.
Right. So there's no need for us to discuss TIF in this commission on this tonight.
That would be my opinion, is that this is a land use case before you. How all this infrastructure gets financed or built is somebody else's problem. And be thankful for that. Bill Reed can tell you, Grant can tell you.
Very true.
Those are hard issues. Very true.
I do have a question for Bill. On your recommendation, it said, I just want to clarify, you said TAF recommends that the Plan Commission hold an additional public hearing on the petition and forward a favorable recommendation. Are you suggesting we hold an additional public hearing and then after that public hearing forward it, or that we go ahead and forward it even though you're recommending we have another public hearing?
Well, this is the second public hearing. So you're
Okay.
actually holding that.
Okay,
public
so
hearing in
okay,
this
so
meeting.
I was, okay.
So
I
yeah,
thought you were
rec-
suggesting an additional public hearing.
No, I was, because you've already held a public hearing,
Okay.
you weren't necessarily obligated to hold a second public hearing on it.
Okay,
But the recommendation of the staff was to hold that second public hearing,
okay.
just to get more input. It never hurts to get that.
Okay, then I was
additional input.
I was misreading what this recommendation was, so.
Read that
Yeah.
too. If could, I'd like to ask if Ryan Cannon would come up to answer some questions on the roads, because I do have that question of, it's not financing, but it's the planning part and the commitments of what we may need to look at for roads. So Ryan, would you be willing to come up and talk to us about that? Because I think you've heard several of us ask questions about and are concerned about the current roads and what's going to be built and how we might help with addressing that, and looking at its voluntary commitment, not compelling the petitioner. So I do appreciate the comment there. So can you help us on, I think 75 North is where we're concerned about.
Sure. So we are having ongoing discussions with them about 75 North. And I think in our meeting, we offered several solutions on a range of improving it to making it into a private road to all kinds of different options. So I think we've provided a lot of solutions, and I think the developer was working on some of those different options, talking to property owners, maybe how they felt about those different options and how they would work. So I don't have a specific answer to what the right solution is. The solution won't be that it just stays the way it is today. I can tell you that for sure. Either it will have to get widened and it'll have to be improved, or it will be a private road and maybe it'll be closed. It won't become a through street anymore. Again, there's a couple different options there that we're pursuing. So again, the status quo of the road staying the way it is now is not one of those discussions. So it's not going to stay the way that it is today. Likewise, 600's the same situation. We don't expect that 600, that we expect that we'll continue that construction up. And so I think the issue becomes who pays for it and how we do it. And again, with the TIF component of that comes into play as well. So that's why there's, on a lot of projects, we don't have kind of these other moving parts. And this one we do, because there is this discussion of TIF and there is this decision about what should the developer pay for, versus what the town should pay for. Roads that are in substandard condition, we typically can't turn around and ask a developer to say, hey, you fix a road that we've not taken care of for 20 years.
Right.
And now at the same time, that road's not in terrible shape for the fact that there's really two property owners using it. Now the school has exasperated the problem and added a lot of traffic there. The school, when we built it there, and I don't know if any of you were on the plan commission at the time, but we had a lot of debate about what the school was responsible for improving, and the school had made a commitment that they'd have no buses coming along that section of road. The problem is we can't restrict and prevent cars from using it. So what has happened is some of the parent traffic that's going to River Birch has used it. That's been the increase in traffic. But to my knowledge, I don't think the school has ever gone back on that agreement that their buses all come around off of 500. 500 is absolutely, it's in good shape. It's been paved by the town in the last 5 years. It's in good shape. It's maintained. It's an adequate width. It's striped appropriately. So I think the two that are concerns are 75 North and 600. But again, 600 is going to be redone from US 36 all the way to 100 North. So the town would like for that to be consistently done all the way to the intersection at 600 and 100 North. And that's the discussion, is we have to figure out who pays for that or who's appropriate to pay for that, whether it's the TIF or the town pays for it out of other funds that we have. And so I think that's some of the discussion that's going on now to try to figure all that out.
I have a question, Ryan.
Mhm.
So if we were to continue this, would it be feasible that we could at least review a conceptual plan for the next meeting of the plan for the roadways?
I think so. We actually got today, and we probably didn't have time to properly vet it. I kind of have been reading over it, but we did get a response on some of the traffic issues from them today. And so it looks pretty good. It's about what we expected. And that's, I think he already said it already, that there was a recommendation of roundabouts at 2 intersections, and then there's turn lane improvements at 2 intersections. So now the question really becomes, that was kind of what we thought the outcome would be. And so now that we see it, now the decision becomes who pays for that and how much of it is their responsibility to pay for. So I definitely think within a month, which I think was my suggestion to Bill, that if the Plan Commission is willing to allow it to move forward, by the time it gets to the Plan Committee or to the Town Council in January, we'll have those issues worked out. But certainly, as Bill said, it's within your purview. And if the Plan Commission's not comfortable allowing that to move forward and they want to know the outcomes of those discussions, I do think by your January meeting, we should be able to have those worked out. If it wasn't Christmas, we probably would have had them worked out already, but it's hard getting people to show up to work, including myself. So,
A quick question. I realize this is probably a radical change, but is it the town's position or is the developer's position they did not want to have a road cut on 100 North to go either into F or into E? Do you understand my question? Bill, can you show it up? I mean, you have it, particularly F, you have this huge subdivision and there's no road to the north leading into it. So
Yeah, I don't know that-
us, or is that the town saying we don't want to cut 100 North, that we don't want to give them egress or ingress there? Or is that the developer saying, I want to be landlocked and I don't want to have, I'll lose houses if I put a road going through that section to alleviate some of the traffic off of 75 North is ridiculous. I mean, you just, it's not even in the outline of the plan.
yeah, the town did not dictate that to them. There are some grade issues if you drive down that road that would potentially restrict it, and then the distance from intersections, but they could probably pull in a drive. And so again, what you guys are looking from a zoning perspective is conceptual still. And I think they would agree that there could still be modifications to what you're looking at between now and when they actually move forward.
I
But
think if I recall,
yeah, that's an option.
there was the issue about having an entrance on off of 100 into that area was grading, that there was some grading issues if I recall correctly.
So I guess the question, and this is what I wanted to ask you about as far as like commitments that we could help the town with as we're looking at this, ask for a commitment to look at an entrance off of 100 North into Section F there. Because it seems like there's 2 possibilities. And I don't know if when you discussed last month, if it's grading on both ends of that, and that's a discussion I missed. Was it for that entire?
We didn't discuss it. I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, certainly. So Section F does have an exit already to 500. So if you're talking about really the dissipation of traffic, people coming out on that entrance to 500 are going to choose to use 100 North anyway. I mean, that's the likely situation. So, I don't want to get into designing the site. They hire engineers to do that for them. And so I'll defer to them, and Baining may want to get up and say, here's why we did it the way we did it.
It seems like to me it'd be better to take that intersection that's on 500, the more northern one, and move it to 100 North, because you can get in there by turning south. You've got another entrance and you have to turn right and then turn left to get into it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would move that one to 100 North. that makes a whole lot more sense than having it where it's at.
Yeah, I mean,
Basically, you have
ultimately-
two entrances on 500 East. You don't need two entrances on 500 East. You need one entrance on 500 East. You need one on 100 North.
Sure. Again, I guess I don't want to engineer and develop the site for them. From a pure traffic perspective, that doesn't matter because they associate a certain amount of traffic's going to go a certain way. And so they're already assuming people coming out of that 500 entrance. It's not going to change the overall big picture of the traffic. When they get to the site situation, then I think you have an absolutely valid point. But again, you may ask one of them to come up and explain why they did it that way. They may have a really good engineering.
I'd like to do that.
They may have a good engineering reason that they did it the way they did it.
I'd like to hear that.
I guess,
Because I can understand the E, because that's where they're building the big houses, right? The estate, that's the estate part with the big houses.
The E,
So I
correct,
can
yeah.
understand why you may not want a road coming in through all the big estate lots. That makes some sense to me, but boy, it's F. It sure makes some more sense to turn that entrance to 100 North.
so before you go away, the question, and the reason why I wanted to ask you to come up and talk with us is that, you know, we already know that there's, through the traffic study, there's going to be service degradation. And to look at getting the commitments, asking for a commitment to help with addressing that, maybe more so than what the condition that Bill's recommended putting on here. Because it seems like participate to come up with a long-term capital solution, but that doesn't really go to what it seems like addressing that we're going to have service degradation on the roads.
Yeah, and I think my expectation is that there will be commitments. I think my suggestion to Bill was that we get those commitments before we go to the town council, because the town council is going to understand that bigger picture of the TIF and how the project's being funded versus kind of having that discussion at the planning commission. So I don't think the suggestion is there won't be commitments from the developer to make road improvements. I just think final decisions will be made by the council. They can, again, if you guys want to see them, then by all means continue it. And by your January meeting, we should be able to have what those look like if that's something all of you want to see. But absolutely, I think there will be commitments for this project, and there will likely be contributions to those road improvements is kind of my expectation. There may be, depending on what portion of that project. So let's just use a turn lane, for example. If a $50,000 turn lane needs to be built and they are creating 80% of the need for that, we may say, we want you to build that turn lane and incur that cost. Now, the problem with degradation is we look at it in chunks. So we look at it as in, here's what it is now, here's what it is with background growth, here's what it is there. Well, when you're talking about a project that's going to take 7 to 12 years to build, well, do you need that on year 5, or do you need it in year 7, or do you need it in year 12? And so it makes it really challenging to kind of look at it on a flat piece of paper, because that's not really what it's like. So, and that's why it's a lot more complicated, and we could spend 5 hours in here talking about it. And that's kind of why we asked you guys to kind of trust us a little bit and defer to us and ultimately let it go to the council. But certainly, like I've said before, it's ultimately your decision. If you guys want more information before you vote, that's perfectly reasonable. We understand that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll let Jeff talk about the entrance.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Jeff Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Drive in Plainfield, 46168. So the entrance, I'm going to talk specifically about the entrance onto County Road 100 North. Originally, we talked about having an entrance there. One of the, I think, items that the Plan Commission needs to understand is that's a signature street, and there are requirements under the ordinance from an access control, access management standpoint. Driveways no more than, or roadways no more than every quarter of a mile. So one of the issues we're running into is with the driveways for the homes to the north, with this home that we're building around, and then with the grade issue on County Road 100, we decided to eliminate that access point and take all the access on 500 to better create that access management plan, knowing that County Road 100 is a pretty good thoroughfare, trying to take that traffic. I know we had talked earlier about getting traffic out to Rockville Road, US 36. That also helps with that situation as well. So that's why we've chosen to do the layout that we have. It's kind of a dual-headed process. One, that's a town ordinance or a town requirement without getting a waiver. And then the other thing, which is probably more significant, honestly, is just that grade difference. If anybody's driven that, I know you all have.
You're
It's
talking about the hills, how
yeah.
it's hilly, and
Yeah.
you're worried about visibility?
Yes,
Is that what
right.
you're saying?
right.
Oh, man,
I mean, so Jeff, you're not opposed to putting a road cut there if the town would ask you to put one there and then go through the appropriate waivers for the signature street. So it sounds like, you're just trying to abide by the ordinance that is currently in place, as well as the safety. But if it's decided that, for traffic alleviation, that you could put a road cut in there, am I hearing that that's something that the developer would be willing to do?
We can look at that. I'm like Ryan. I hate redesigning subdivisions in a public hearing.
Right.
I think what, and what I would propose that we do is we would look at how that would affect our traffic, if it affects the traffic. I think that would probably be a better, more acceptable approach than just to say, hey, we're going to put an entrance here, especially when that has become a pretty big issue along County Road 100 North throughout town.
Well, to my ear, I can understand the hill. I can understand that. And maybe maybe they can take the top of that hill off somehow for the biggest project is this. But to say there's a driveway there, and the reason we're not putting entrances is because there's a driveway, that, to me, that doesn't hold water.
No, sorry, I might not have stated that correctly. It's the 1/4 mile sections. It has nothing to do with that driveway that's there.
They're within a 1/4 mile along that stretch of F then. Where are the other entrances that you're concerned about?
On the north side, there
On the
are,
north side.
yes.
Where are they?
You can see them up there on the drawing.
I don't see them, sorry.
Do we have a pointer?
Right here.
This might not be the best map in the world. There's driveway.
You need on the north side of 100.
Yes.
So you're
yes.
saying you couldn't put an entrance on the south side of 100 because there's driveways on the north side of 100?
No, we can put one in here, but what we feel like would happen by putting this drive here, it's going to create an potential unsafe situation here with all the other driveways up here. We'll likely need to put in turn lanes and tapers and so forth here.
Well, don't you have driveways on 100 east? Excuse me, 500 east?
500 east.
Aren't there houses along that way too?
So this is an existing access, existing roadway right here. This is already set up. So no requirements or no improvements required as far as passing with.
That road's already there?
Yeah, this road is already.
It tees right now into 500?
Correct.
So you're saying you're just going to extend that? Okay,
Yes, that's
that
right.
makes some sense to me.
That's right. We're just, sorry, I'm not talking in front of the microphone. From a planning standpoint, extension of driveway or roadways, not only here, we had the same thing happening down here, Muirfield Village. So, right here. So we're just trying to it's really no different than lining up here at 575. We're trying to line up at all of the current existing roadways that have been set up in the past. As another, I think somebody mentioned over here in Area E, our driveway in Area E, if you want to look at that, we are actually lining up with the church's driveway to the north of us. Rather than being offset, that's why our roadway is here.
So there is an entrance to E from 100 north?
Correct.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Area E stands on its own, and we are lining up with the current driveway for the church to the north of us. There's a driveway right here for the church to the north of us. So we're trying to do that access management per what the town's
So the
guidelines.
problem is they can't get to D from E. So we're 75 North is servicing the D sections, right? Because you can't get to D from E.
Correct, because of, this is a huge hill right here, right? You can kind of see that darker area right here. This is the wooded hill. It's the same way all throughout this area here. So that's why E stands alone, is because we could not get a roadway up this ridge right here at a grade that would be allowable per the ordinance. And we're trying to save trees, as which we've talked about previously.
I think we can assume that at some point you all will be presenting us with a very comprehensive, detailed plan for all of these entrances and how they're impacting the roadways and I mean, we are still in the early days, correct?
Correct. So after we get the zoning approved, whenever that occurs, or you give a recommendation, we go to the council, we will come back before this body with a primary plat, which will show the actual design detail of these particular items.
And those are still being worked out.
Correct.
So
I will,
tell me your concerns then about converting 74 North, the part that runs north and south from 100 down to your D section that's outside your property.
Right.
How comfortable are you working that road?
so we have this area right here,
right there, yeah.
and then this area right here. I can tell you, we have had multiple layouts, proposals, concepts on how we would deal with that. Part of the issue we're working with is White Lake Creek runs right along here. So we have a floodway that we're dealing with. The town's trail, which we're showing right here, extends up through here as well. And the town has spent a lot of money, purchased property to extend that trail. So we're looking at options of what we can do to improve that roadway through here, as well as what we do with the roadway here. As Ryan said, does that become a private road? Do we upgrade that? Those are the sort of items that we're working through at this point to try to figure out what we do in this particular area.
Do you think by next month you'd have those options better defined?
Well, that is our goal. We were looking at having those more defined as we were getting to the town council process.
I think we're kind of jumping the gun here. I think what is being discussed is something that would be discussed a little further down the process. Right now, I think we're just at the request is the first step. And the details will come before this body at a future date. And at that point, we can get into the weeds on that. I'm not sure this is the meeting for doing that.
So we'll have an opportunity, if we don't like the options of how they're getting into their section D, we'll have an opportunity later down the road to say, no, that's not acceptable. Is that right, Bill?
Honestly, you're at what I would call the rezoning phase of the plan unit development. It becomes ministerial after this. So if the plan unit development ordinance basically specifies what the requirements are, like Jeff said, the way the ordinance is written, a secondary master plan approval is, in this particular case, it'll be a combination of primary plat and development plan approval, because of the town center section will essentially be done as probably some sort of hybrid of a primary plat and development plan, while the balance of the single family will be just done through a primary platting. Those are both ministerial petitions, meaning that if they meet the standards, then you have to approve it. So if you want something incorporated into the standard this is probably the time for you to do it.
Yeah, so maybe to add to that or just change. So we're approving the PUD if we forward a favorable recommendation, and the PUD now is the standard that they develop to, and not
Exactly,
the R1, R2, it's the PUD.
Right.
So-
The plan unit development, you are setting the you are forwarding a recommendation on the standard.
Right, so now's the time,
Town
like you
council
said,
approves the standard.
now's the time to ask for any changes in the language of the PUD before we would forward a recommendation to the council, which they could ask for and send it back to us at the same time.
Yeah, if you want a standard, now's the time to establish the standard.
So is access to the PUD part of our discussion tonight? I mean, I don't have a problem with the PUD, I have a problem with access to it. So I don't know whether that's outside of what we're discussing tonight or not.
I don't think it's necessarily outside. Maybe you have a different opinion. I don't, because I think that in your ordinance, it makes a reference to transportation and traffic information. So I don't think it's necessarily outside of your purview. I know that from my perspective, I tend to defer to the Public Works Director and to the town manager because they are the duty experts in this, and I'm a generalist. You know, as an urban planner, I'm a generalist. I don't get into those details. The town manager and the
And we deferred to them tonight and they couldn't give us any, in my mind, we deferred to them tonight and they couldn't give us an answer.
I think we've been given a lot of good information. For instance, the fact that 500 is now a very well-built and well-established road that can handle the kind of traffic that we're looking at coming out of sections F. 100 is not. And so we would not only be talking about putting additional traffic that 100 is currently not positioned to take, but now we're talking about how do we figure out who's going to pay for that, who's going to, I mean, we're adding another layer of complexity. I personally like the idea of all of F being funneled onto 75 and then going out onto 500, simply because we now have a road that doesn't need any further improvement that can handle that traffic. That makes a lot more sense to me to divert it that way, as opposed to putting additional traffic onto 100 North, which is not prepared for it and which will need major, I'm using the term major very
I'm good
generically.
with F. I'm
Yeah.
good with F tonight after hearing what we talked. I'm good with F. I'm concerned about D.
Yeah,
About
Maybe-
D having access to 100 North?
Through 75 north, yeah, where it turns and goes north, yeah. Have you driven it?
Not in a long time,
Okay,
but I know
yeah,
what you're
well,
talking
it's
about.
not-
Yeah.
It's not pleasant.
No, yeah. But I'm not sure that creating access to 100 North, giving D access to 100 North, I'm not sure how you do that without adding additional costs both to the town
Right,
and or
we're
the
not sure.
county.
We're right, we're not sure how they're going to do it. And that's the problem. In my mind, that's the problem. We don't know how they're going to get access to 100 North to get people into their D sections. To me, that's the problem.
So I guess one of the things, and Dan, I think you're going to make a comment here, but are we talking that we would like to see what the plan is for the roads before we move forward with a recommendation or not to the
Yes.
council? And that's what it seems like we're talking about.
Right, a conceptual plan, and so that we can make an educated decision to pass it on through to the town council.
If we're going to do that, I would also want to have the petitioners come prepared to explain their reasoning for instance, how D is going to be, what the access points are going to be for there. I'm not crazy about continuing this again. I think everyone's in agreement that we all like the general plan, but it feels like we're getting bogged down a little bit in the weeds. And I know this is important, but we need to get these moving.
Yeah, one day, I just want to respond. Ed, to your question, the answer is yes. If you make a recommendation that the town council approve this, then on the land use side, you're not going to see it again. Okay, this is your chance, and this is probably partially my fault because Paul keeps looking at me and saying, well, Dan, in training, you told us. You're right. Okay. So this is an unusual case. What the town staff had proposed to you was, we don't have all these details worked out. The town anticipates, I would imagine, at least one sort of agreement with the developer about who's going to pay for what. They just aren't there yet. And so what they invited you to do is to think about sending it to the town council with a favorable recommendation. And then those details could be worked out by the town council. And the town council, of course, will be involved in some of these other parts that we are not. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do that. That's what the staff is asking you to do. That doesn't mean you have to do that, because Bill's right. When it comes back to you, the only question at the preliminary plat stage is whether what they're presenting to you now in that detail complies with the ordinance, which is the PUD ordinance and your other applicable ordinances. And so when you ask the question, the answer really is yes, you're right. This is your one time. Do you want to control that? And if you want to do that, if you want to not send a recommendation until you're sure, then you have that right. Now, let me mention two other things I think is worth noting. One is that this idea of commitments and conditions, if you were to send a recommendation to the town council can make the conditions more restrictive than you required without sending it back to you. So they can be a little tougher than you, and that's fine. They cannot be less restrictive. So if they for some reason came up with a less restrictive commitment, they have to send it back to you. And it kind of works like a text amendment, kind of gets bounced back to you. And so that's kind of a new law about commitments. And so in general, what we see is that the law says that if the town council wants to be more stringent than you, they're allowed to do that. They're not allowed to be less. So you play an important role on any commitments because you kind of establish the floor. Okay, that's really important to note. The second thing is that the financial piece of this on road construction, normally we're talking about one intersection, maybe another peripheral intersection that's affected, maybe another one down here, and maybe a turn lane. But this is very large. Okay, this is I don't know if Mr. Wathen's right. It may be the largest. Seems like the settlement was big too, but it's a long time ago. But it's certainly very large. It involves a lot of traffic issues, and so there's no right answer here. You could make a recommendation, send it on the town council if you choose, and say, look, we trust the staff and the town council, or you could say, no, we want more information. Here's my final comment. I would strongly ask you to consider, regardless of what you decide about your decision, but always remember this. I do think that you've got trained people on your staff to do the engineering. They have reviewing engineers. The developers have engineers, 7, 8, 9, I can't count them all, a lot of them. And they'll do all that work. So again, I think that if we have concerns about engineering issues, we need to ask Ryan Cannon to come up, and you need to ask him what he thinks. But also, we should have some deference to our own experts. Some. I'm not saying you have to agree with them, but we should at least. I'm not a traffic engineer, nor do I play one on TV. I don't know. I try to stay out of that area, but. So if we have questions about it, about engineering issues, like Mr. Cannon said something interesting. He said, it doesn't matter whether you put the access point on 100 or 500, the cars are going to go where they're going to go. And I suppose he's right about that. Now, we may have other reasons, each of us, for not wanting access on 500, but it's not about traffic flow. There could be other reasons. I'm just saying that, you know, there are certain assumptions in traffic engineering. And so if there are other reasons we want access on 100 and not 500, well, then let's hear it. But just remember that you don't have to trust their engineers, although I like Jeff Fine. Okay, we need to trust our own experts, and we need to defer to them to some degree. And that's why you'll hear me say both tonight and at training, you know, I don't like you, the Plan Commission. I don't like any of us to re-engineer projects in these meetings. You've heard that phrase. One is because it's very difficult, time consuming, and secondly, because we're not really, none of us were hired to do that. So, so you guys raised lots of issues. You can go whichever way you want, but I just want to try to remind you that what you do now is important. And also to remind you about these commitments, how the council can only be more strict or stringent, that they can't be less stringent. So that becomes an important part of your decision making.
So you might want to hang out there, Jeff. So Bill, I got a question for you, a different question. So to address one of the letters in our package about the connection to the Galloway Street in, is it Muirfield there? It's to the south.
Right.
And I understand the request, because that seems like what we see when apartment complexes get built next to residential. But it seems like when you build a neighborhood with the stub road, there's an expectation that there's going to be continuity to the development going in where that stub road leads. And isn't that kind of what we're looking at here of would we, the town, look at putting in a gate, or would we really look at more calming, any sort of traffic calming development there if needed to address any sort of increased traffic through that development?
Here's where I make enemies, of course. We put stub streets, or we require, now this is in the county, all right, so we'll put that out there at the first place. But we require stub streets in subdivisions for a reason. And the reason we require stub streets is so that at some point in the future, we can connect this public street system to that stub street and connect and create an interconnected street system. Failure to connect these stub streets just pushes everybody out on the arterial streets and the collector streets, increasing congestion on already congested roadways. So if someone within these subdivisions wants to use their internal street system to get from point A to point B without having to get on an arterial street, I think part of our response as a town is to give them the opportunity to do that. Having said that, a remonstrator did come in and speak with me, and when I told her that, well, the town's going to require that, she was not a happy camper. But I'll tell you the same. I would tell you the same thing. We, as the town, think that that street should be connected. We don't think there should be access controls on it. We think that the residents of that subdivision should have the opportunity to interconnect with the street system in this proposed development just as much as the future residents of this development may use that public street to get to the 500. Having said that, conceptually and common sense wise, if you look at it, there's really no reason for people in this development to go through that subdivision because the access point is so close to that intersection that it just makes sense for them to use their own access points to get out, giving them more room on 500 to get down to some of these controlled intersections. Even if we connect this street, or the town's position is that street should be connected, and the doom and gloom about 100 not being able to back out of my driveway, I think is overblown. I don't think that there's going to be near the traffic impact on that existing subdivision that people believe that it's going to be when we connect that street.
If I could add on to that, we heard that at our neighborhood meeting. effectively, we stated what Bill said, but we said ultimately, you know, the decision is really a plan commission, town planner, you know, decision. So we've all along shown that connecting up, because that is historically, typically what we do is to extend the street system. I think the other thing, there was another comment earlier. One thing we need to think about Area F, with it being the HOPA condition or the HOPA development, is that's a much different demographic when you think about traffic. They aren't going out in the peak times in the morning and the evenings. If I'm living there, I'm hopefully sleeping in a little bit and I'm coming in earlier. So I think that that traffic issue is going to be a different type of issue as well, just because of the use of that development, that part of the development.
Thank you. I want to get that on the record because I agree with staff. I believe that we need connectivity and that's good. So thank you for that.
South side of F, right?
Right.
Correct.
There's a stub street in Muirfield Village,
But the chances of them
and
driving through that complex to get out
is there going to be an
very, very
increase in
slim.
traffic? Yes, there's going to be an increase. There's going to be a handful of traffic that goes through there to the
Yeah.
development, but it's not going to be near as bad as what I've heard.
I will bring up that we heard about increasing the landscape buffer between A and D and the development there. And I would ask that the developer work with the landowners there and consider that. I understand the request and just see what possibly could be done to alleviate the concerns there.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was a bit surprised by that comment, because I did review that. And the proposal is for evergreen, a fairly robust, matter of fact, the proposed buffer that if that were, it's zoned commercially.
Yeah.
So if it were developed in accordance with its existing zoning, there would be a 30-foot wide buffer, but the landscape elements would be less. So if it were developed to its existing, I mean, the buffer that's being proposed is a little narrower. Commercial would require 10 or 30, and this is what they propose is a 20-foot buffer. But the landscape elements that would be in that buffer, if it were developed commercially, would be less than what the proposal is here, which is, and we're talking essentially about, now it's townhomes, but it's single family against single family. It's a denser single family against a less dense single family, but you're not talking about a huge difference in land use to require a fairly robust transition between these two land uses. So I was surprised by that comment.
If I may, I'd like to try to get back to County Road 600 and County Road 75. I think what makes this project particularly different from other projects that come before this body is that, and I think we've all heard this, County Road 600 from our north property line up to County Road 100 North, a couple things. One, it's not in the town of Avon. And two, it's not on our property. And that becomes the dilemma. I can tell you, our development team, we want that to work right. There is no questions. And we've met with town staff. Ryan came up and mentioned that. We're going to work through that to make that work. Unfortunately, that isn't all in our control. And that becomes part of the dilemma in trying to resolve this issue, is we need to get through the process here to get to the town council to start having those sort of discussions. It's really similar when we were talking about the traffic signal out on US 36. We've got Indiana Department of Transportation saying, hey, listen, we're not really going to look at this until you get your zoning, because we've looked at a lot of projects that never get approved. We're not going to waste our time on it and get down into the minutia until we know we really have a project there. Those discussions have been had, and I assure you that's what we're doing in both of those particular areas. So I just wanted to
The
state that.
extension of 600 up to 100, those conversations with the county can't really happen yet, correct? Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
They could, but it's a situation. We don't
They're
know
not
that we
gonna
have
go
a
very far.
project,
We're not going
right?
to go very far
Yeah.
until we pass this step.
Right.
So one thing I want to make sure, because we really haven't talked about the criterion as staff proposed, and I just want to get on record here that I agree with the staff's review and recommendation on all 5 criterion for this zoning request. So I guess the thing I'd say for the commissioners, I mean, I'm good with making a recommendation and putting the commitment that staff has recommended, making that motion tonight. Just, I know we've had discussion on whether we want to do that or continue it to get more information. So I'll just put that out there to move the conversation forward. Because I'm going to assume the petitioner is good with the commitment that's in here.
Well, and the commitment says that the developer shall continue to coordinate with the town, county, and IDT to formulate a plan with regards to roadways and degradation of service. I would assume that that would include conversations about how 75 and 650 and that extension and all of the traffic related, and there are myriad traffic-related concerns with regards to those 2 roads. I don't think by going ahead and going forward with the recommendation tonight is going to mean that we no longer are going to have any further conversations about it. I move that we forward PUD 2103 Easton Gray PUD, a request to rezone approximately 487 acres from C3, R1, R1A, and R2 to the PUD classification to the town council with a favorable recommendation, subject proposed PUD ordinance, and to the following commitment. The developer shall continue to coordinate with the town, county, and Indiana Department of Transportation to formulate a mid to long-term capital improvements plan in order to mitigate insufficient roadways and degradations of service as a result of this development prior to secondary master plan approval of the planned unit development.
Second.
Before we continue, did you have any comments?
No. I think I've said my piece and I've heard what
Okay,
Dan said, so I'm good.
Call for a roll.
so roll call.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine Ransberg,
4,
Paul Gutenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Grant Niemeyer,
Against?
Ed Rosenbaum.
Against.
That is an indecisive vote. To take official action, the Plan Commission needs to have at least 4 members to approve or deny a motion.
so does this automatically continue to the next meeting, or do we have to make a motion?
You can make another motion, but if that motion fails, then it would be another indecisive vote, and then it would probably, by mechanism of the rules of procedure, automatically continue itself to the next meeting.
So question then, as far as like what we need here, is Ed and Grant, are you looking for, we need more information before moving forward?
To me, it's just too big of an assumption. I mean, and I think this is the planning part. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to plan, how does this work going forward? And I just don't think, I'm not comfortable making that big of an assumption on how we're going to get into D.
What would we need for, to look at? Is it about
We have
roads?
all these engineers out here and they say there's all these options, but I haven't heard what the options are. I haven't heard a concrete thing. Here's what we're going to do. And maybe that's not possible. You can't have all the Ts crossed and all the Is dotted.
Problem is, they can't go forward with providing us with options until we give them approval on the zoning.
Well, at the minimum, though, we could have at least a conceptual plan so we can give a favorable recommendation to the town council.
I
mean,
would
right
ask the
now-
petitioner, is it possible for us to get a conceptual plan for roads?
Which I'm assuming you were going to do for the council meeting.
Can someone from the county come in and talk to us and say, yeah, this is doable if we sit down and talk, we're willing
Exactly,
to
that
work
was
with
gonna
these
be my-
guys?
I agree with that.
I mean,
too.
I don't know if the county's willing to work with them.
Right.
And if the county's not willing to work with them, then I can't approve this project. Because, I can't approve D, I can approve all the other, and I don't think they want to cut D out because the revenue's going to fail, but
There's too many unknowns for me to feel comfortable to pass this along to the town council. I mean, this is our job, is to prepare this for the town council to be able to make a favorable recommendation one way or the other.
because I think they're going to have the same questions that we have.
I don't think,
is
I don't
100
think it's reasonable to assume that the county's not going to work with a developer on this kind of thing. I mean, that's
Well,
what
a
the
big
county
assumption,
does.
though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to hear.
Well-
I want to hear from them. That's all.
If I could, is 100 North in the county right now in this area?
I think we're talking about,
North
I
of,
believe 100 North is in the town. But I think we're talking about 600 East, which there's a section of about half of that you've seen there is not in the town.
right. And has the county worked with us in the past?
Yes.
Do you see any difficulty in working with, that they would not work with us on this?
Has the county ever refused to work with us on a development?
I don't know if they've ever refused to work with us. I think that to understand county government, it's all usually a matter of money. And county governments typically don't have a lot.
Mr. Cannon, you want to help us?
Yeah, Bill's right. So the county is not going to prohibit anything from happening. The county may just say, we're not going to pay for it, which is going to be their position either way, which again is that those are the details we're working out. Either the town's going to pay for it or the developer's going to pay for it. The county's not going to pay for it and the county's not going to stand in the way of it happening. So
So that's,
there's no value in the county coming here. Quite frankly, they probably won't come here. But it's a decision that needs to be resolved between us and the developer. The county will go along with whatever we decide. The county's going to say, for all intents and purposes, this is in the town of Avon. Why are we going to try to dictate to the town of Avon how you want to do it? So
And having sat through several meetings where there are negotiations between the town and the county for contribution, those meetings do not take place in public meetings, and there are good reasons for that as well. So I'm not sure this is the forum to vet all that out either. But again, if you need more information, if that's your position, then staff knows what to get you. Okay, but again, I don't think that the county's going to say exactly what Ryan says, and then if we ask to talk about money, they're going to want to go in a private room and have that conversation.
but I assume this is a significant expense, right? I mean, 7 figures perhaps to extend this road that far down and to hit all that. I mean, we're talking about a big cost, correct?
Bill, do you have a pointer?
Yes, I do.
Is it the top one, Bill?
Yeah, it's green button.
Okay, so maybe there's some confusion. So here's the entrance here. So this can be a road that comes right here, that comes all the way to here. This road, the developer is proposing to build. So when we're talking about the county, we're talking about this piece here to this piece here. There's that little portion. We're talking. Correct. Yeah, so there's just a small portion there that's actually in the county. And then there's a 3 homes that abut the county. Mr. Downey is correct. So we're talking about that piece. So we're talking about, again, depending on what the solution is, if it's a complete reconstruction versus a widening and resurfacing, we could be talking about anywhere from 80,000 to 250,000. We're not talking about millions of
This
dollars.
isn't constructing a brand new road from scratch.
Correct. No, the road is existing. The road is just in a substandard condition. So we would be bringing it up to a town standard or to a reasonable standard that we can expect additional traffic to go on it.
So Ryan, we're going to do that. If we move forward to this PUD, the town is going to have to address that one way or the other. It's whether who's going to pay for it or not.
That's the discussion at this moment is the town would take the lead and either whether we contribute a portion of it to the developer and the developer pays for it, or the developer contributes something and the town pays for it. That's the mechanism that we're determining who's paying for it and who's building it, and that's what we're trying to resolve. It won't be that it's left the way it is and that nothing will happen.
And that's why, my opinion is, we don't hold up the PUD moving forward to the council, because that's going to get addressed one way or the other, whether the town's going to pay for it or the county's going to pay for it, but it'll get addressed. But if we don't do it, it's like any development where the town butts up against the county. If the county doesn't do anything, we're still going to have development.
And I would
don't see
assume
why
this is
we-
not a hill anybody wants to die on.
No, I don't think so. I think this is something that will get worked out. It's not a not going to happen discussion. But I also want to make it clear that there's a road here as well that comes all the way up and connects to 75 North right here as well. The way they're showing that road continuing now, it comes across here. So when we talk about D not having access, D has access here. There's also a road that comes across right here. So D has access to come here and get out to 75. D has access to come down here. D has access to be able to come here and come all the way out here. There's multiple ways that D has the ability to get out of the subdivision. It's never going to have access to 100 North. The only way it would potentially do that is if we just, depending on what the decision is about this section of 75 North. And does that continue through to 600 or does it not? And the town has concerns about this connecting through because now we have the same problem we have today. Cars come down here and come through River Birch. And so now we're asking cars to come through here. So if the town has its way, we'd like for this road not to go through and that everybody will come this way or everybody will come this way and come out. And that this won't continue to be a through street. So now going back to what Bill showed you in the thoroughfare plan, we have a collector road that comes through here that connects to here, and we have a collector road that comes through here that handles the traffic. We don't want a third collector running through here. So that's what we're trying to remedy at this point.
So the town's preference is to still limit the traffic that would be occurring on that extension or on that improvement of 625.
That is, or of
600,
75
600.
North. Our preference, it would be that traffic does not continue on 75 North.
So the town
This
wants,
will come here and all the traffic will use this, all the traffic will use this, and all the traffic will use this and come out. So they'll still have at least 3 different ways that they can get in and out of the subdivision.
They just wouldn't have direct access to 100.
Correct.
so the way it's drawn now, the town doesn't like. Is that what you're saying? The east-west part right there, the town does not want
Correct. So
that.
this right now, they're showing improving this road.
And you're saying you don't want that. So you'd stop it somewhere
That
there
would be
at
our
that
preference.
bend? You'd
Yeah,
stop at
the
that
discussion
bend?
we've had is this may be a cul-de-sac. And then this may end up being closed off and this may become a private road or even a private drive, or this may end up with a cul-de-sac that just serves those 2 houses.
So then you don't even
So we're only
do the
talking about
extent,
2
then you don't even
houses
do the
there.
extension to 100 North then. You don't mess with it. 'Cause
Not from 75.
Right,
So
right.
75 doesn't
So-
go to, it only goes to 600 and 600 connects to 100 North.
But the developer wants that leg.
Not necessarily, no.
Well, then why don't we just take it off the board and say we're not going to do it?
Well, because I think they're trying to work that out with the property owner at this point. But
Work
again,
what out with the
I'll let them speak to that
I don't know.
issue.
Why is the property owner, what's the property owner concerned about?
The property owner wants a through street. Property owner wants a through street.
He wants a through street?
Yes.
That seems like that would increase
Yeah, I
the
was gonna say, if
traffic
he's
going
here, you may
across.
ask him. I
That
don't-
would increase the traffic going by his house, right? I guess I'm really confused now.
It looks like the property owners here would like to speak, if he could.
You ask why we want the street to stay in the towns. First of all, the town annexed this many years ago with the school.
I'm sorry, could you identify
Oh,
yourself,
I'm sorry, I'm
please?
Mark Downey. I
Your
live at
address?
5700 East County Road 75 North.
Thank you.
And as you follow that windy road up the hill, I'm the house that's at the top of the hill. Okay? Now, you asked questions. First of all, I will say to your planning commission that there's an old saying I had. I'm a retired engineer, 45 years in the business. And I used to do this stuff, so I'm not really stupid about this. But the purpose of me having that road through there is the fact that today I came down to find out what was going on because nobody will call and talk to me. Finally got a call from the developer at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, asking if I was going to come here tonight and apologized to me because he never got with me. So 75 and 100 North is not the developer's problem. It's going to be the people who live there. But why I want the road there is because your director of public works told me today that we will let the road deteriorate. My address is off of 75, 5700 East 75. I've lived there for a little over 6 years. But the issue is I'm not going to maintain that road. You guys had annexed it and you got an obligation to maintain it. Now, why do you want to turn it over to me just to turn it back into an old chip and seal road? And I have a 45-foot motorhome up there and I need access, and I need access both ways because I've got a large pole barn up there too. And when I leave to the west and follow 75 out to 500. When I come in sometimes 10th, go down 600, take the windy road up. And I've got 2 driveways that go up that circle around up there. But I come in, I've got to maneuver a 45-foot motorhome. So I don't want you to just turn this over to being my problem. It's the town street. Fix it. Get it upgraded and get it improved. There's nothing wrong with the people going to the school using that road. It's just it's too narrow. And I got ruts right in front. You can go up to my house and drive through and you'll see ruts where a pickup truck coming this way from the school and a pickup truck going this way to the school, one of them's going to run off the road. It happens every day. Now, a lot of the cars aren't pickup trucks, but you can go up there and see there's a lot of ruts there. At some point in time, and that's what I'm asking, you guys need to coordinate with the property owners. When you go up 600, well, also I have a neighbor immediately adjacent to me, Mrs. Love, who has the house just east of mine. She's got an input that needs to be put into this. But don't ignore this. Actually, there's 5 people that are being affected. Myself, Mrs. Love, and the 3 houses up to 10th Street. They're directly impacted and they need to be considered. I heard you say tonight was the second public hearing. So when you guys get this worked out, do I get an opportunity to come back and weigh in on it? Yes or no? So failing to plan is planning to fail. Take the month, come back next month, and they can take the time to go out there and sketch up some alternatives for you. I'll tell you, any engineer can give you an estimated cost of what it might be. Then you'll know where it's headed, how much money you're going to have to get, and you guys are the planning directors. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you for giving me time.
So Bill, can I ask one more question then? So 75 runs tees into the school and then turns south. So will 75 become still a county road or will it be part of the development's responsibility to keep the roads up?
Well, I guess that's part of the complication with the capital improvements planning that the town's trying to do. Currently, it's a public street, and it'd be a public street, and it'd be the town's maintenance requirement for maintenance. If the town wants to remove a public street from its inventory, there is a vacation process that it has to go through, and the town council has the ultimate authority on that. So if it comes to the point where the town wants to make it a private street and turn it over to adjoining property owners for long-term maintenance, it would have to, even the town would have to ask the council for that opportunity, and the council could very well keep it in the town's inventory.
So
I think that the long-term assumption that should be made is it's a public street right now until such time as the council makes a determination that it's not.
So this, let's just take the section E. So the streets in E, that cul-de-sac, the entranceway and all that, that could be the developer's responsibility because he's putting those private streets in. But then just south of that where 75 is, that could still be the county or the town's responsibility to maintain that street. So you have,
I think all these are public streets. I think this is a public street system in here.
so
This is-
all these streets are going to be
Yeah.
public.
And the developer will construct them, but at some point it'll be turned over to the town for long-term maintenance. So all the street system in there is all public street system.
Our ordinance requires those roads be dedicated.
So snow removal all be on the town to do all that? and
That's
all-
what we require. That's our policy. They have to be constructed generally by the developer, dedicated to the town that we take over. Forever. That's the town policy.
So I guess I'm still confused by the resident as to what he thinks is going to be harmful or not harmful with what's already there. So, okay.
Yeah, you're in
We should
the,
probably get a motion before it.
yeah.
One way or the other.
So
So you-
has,
you've got
has
a-
anybody changed their position with regards to this motion?
Well, so it sounds like we're talking about more information on roads.
Okay.
And if we
so-
had more information on roads, because that way, it almost felt like, are we punting our responsibility to the council? But we're kind of tied with that, the roads information.
I would move that we continue this to the next scheduled meeting of the, let me say this more thoroughly. I move that we continue PUD 2103 Easton Gray PUD, a request to rezone approximately 487 acres from C3, R1, R1A, and R2 to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, which is set for January 24th, 2022, and that the petitioner be prepared to provide the commission with a proposed conceptual plan for the roadways of Easton Gray.
Second.
I think you probably do the continuance with just a simple aye and nay vote personally. Oh, is there a rule? Okay, all right. That would be you.
Captain Ransford,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Grant Niemeyer,
4.
Ed Rosenbaum.
4.
I would also like to suggest that we take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We do appreciate
Take
the participation.
We'll take it.
Meeting to order, please.
Next item on the agenda under new business is DPRA 2119 Aldrich Dental Parking Lot Expansion. This is a request to expand an a parking lot by an additional 13 spaces to the south of the existing building. This is a 1.73 acre property located at 10373 East County Road 100 North and is also located within the Reagan Crossing Plan Unit Development. The property is zoned PUD. Pull up my presentation. This is as I said, this is a request to expand a parking lot of a dental clinic from 28 spaces to 41 spaces. The property is located within the Reagan Crossing Plan Unit Development and is properly zoned for a dental clinic. And the site was originally developed in 2017 under DPR 1710. While the zoning ordinance typically caps the amount of parking provided at 115% of the minimum required, the Reagan Crossing PUD actually has an alternate. And what it requires is that if a parking lot is over 110% of the minimum required, it requires that parking to be constructed out of some sort of pervious surface rather than an impervious one. As a result, there is no cap on parking in this PUD, and the additional parking has been provided in accordance with the plan unit development. The reason this has come before you is because in the zoning ordinance in section 4-8, it does require the plan commission to approve any expansion of a parking lot over 25% of the number of existing spaces, and this request is for 46%. The petitioner himself has provided the expansion is made of pervious pavement. The landscaping plan submitted complies with the zoning and subdivision control ordinance standards, and the request is, as I said, consistent with the plan unit development, the zoning and subdivision control ordinances. We do recommend approval of it, subject to the 3 standard conditions associated with a development plan review. We have those up on the screen right now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So did I understand and read correctly that there's already been expansion?
No, this is the first expansion. The existing parking lot was constructed 2017, 2018 timeframe when the
Okay.
dental office was constructed. What they're trying to do is put additional parking to the south of the development. That additional parking exceeds the 10% cap on, or not cap, but the 10% limitation on impervious surface. And so what's required of this development is that little parking lot be made of pervious pavement. That's what they've designed, and that's what they intend to install.
Okay.
And it's been reviewed, and it meets all the standards of the ordinance, drainage ordinance, subdivision control ordinance, and so on.
So they're just expanding what they already have on grass, land they already
Right.
own?
Yeah, on the south side of the building.
So the only
You
concern
can
would be
see it.
more drainage, more water runoff or something. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of that could be even possible.
You can see it's, so it's in this area right here.
So it's highly commercialized already.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's just as is the case with most dental clinics, they usually need more parking than a minimum. It was just fortunate that this plan unit development allows it. Dental clinics almost always have to come before you with a waiver of that provision of the ordinance because they tend to have a great deal of traffic.
In and out.
Is there any other questions for staff? The petitioner could come to the podium and present.
Bill, can you be able to put PDF? Yeah. It's like page 2 or 3. Good evening, I'm Dale Cruz, Cruz Consulting, 7384 Business Center Drive in Avon. And I'm here this evening on behalf of Dr. Aldridge. Dr. Aldridge is fortunate that she's experiencing exponential growth. She's a local business and needs the parking spaces just to operate her business. So these 13 parking spaces, they're going to flash the the site plan up on the screen, these 13 parking spaces will actually be where her employees will park, and 28 parking spaces that she currently has that's shared with customer and employees will just be used solely for customer parking. So there's a site plan. In that area, just to the south of the building is that hatched area.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the green button.
All right, so that's her existing building. It's built in 2017. And right here are the 28 parking spaces that she currently has. And then just to the south of the building, there's a grass area. Her dumpster is right here, and there's a storm sewer inlet right here that was put in when this development was originally constructed. And so the proposal is to add this area right here, which is made up of 13 parking spaces. It'll drain through this area right here, this lighter hatched area. And this lighter hatched area is the pervious pavement that the ordinance requires. And it will drain subsurface. Actually, water gets down into the ground. It'll drain by a subdrain over into an inlet that's right here, and then off to the regional detention that's part of the overall development that's been there since the original development for the whole area was put in. So that's it. She's fortunate to have growth. She needs parking spaces for employees, and this is where we propose to put them.
Do we know if there was a request for increased parking when this was first put in?
I can't recall. I know that the petitioner did submit a waiver, and we were ready to present the waiver, but we found that that's how we originally submitted was regular pavement. And then as I was reviewing it through the Reagan PUD, I realized, the waiver, there's no waiver necessary, but they do have to build it to pervious, and that's the reason it came this way. But I didn't check the original file to see if there's a waiver presented at that time.
Okay. So I'm a little confused. So there's no need for a waiver?
Right. So in the ordinance, in the zoning ordinance, there is a minimum that's established by the land use. But there's also a maximum. In one of the notes, it's 15.
In terms of parking spaces?
Right, and sort of the number of parking spaces. So if this were straight zoned, they would need to provide a waiver of that requirement of the ordinance. And you would normally have to approve that waiver to let them exceed 15%, 115% of the minimum. But they don't have that because it's in a planned unit
So
development.
why are we here tonight?
Because in this particular case, the zoning ordinance states that you have to approve parking expansions above 25% of the existing. I can approve administratively expansions of parking lots as long as the number of parking lots are 24% or less of the existing parking spaces. This is an expansion of 46% of the existing parking spaces. So you have to approve this by the ordinance.
Even though we don't need to approve a waiver?
Right. You don't have to do anything. You just have to approve the site plan right now and let them build it.
Okay.
But believe me, if I could administratively approve this, I would, because I don't want to waste your
this is getting into the
time.
minutia of ordinance
Yeah,
interpretation and everything, but I was just okay, so this is just a.
Yeah.
So
this-
Bill, if they had
Following the
built,
rules.
if they had built a bigger parking lot at the very start. they
Yeah,
could've.
I mean, if this was,
They had approval to do this. They just didn't build a big enough parking lot when they first built the building then. They had the right to build a bigger one if they wanted to at the time.
they
Now,
could have,
because
yeah.
they're expanding it, we have to give this approval because they're expanding it.
Right, they could have, if they wanted to, but, obviously, new businesses like this, they're gonna cut costs, they're gonna
So it's kind
minimize
of a
costs, and if they don't need it, they didn't need it. and they come-
Distinction without a difference. They don't need the waiver, but they do need our approval.
Right, I mean, it's just because of the size of the expansion.
Okay.
Got it.
In the ordinance, certain things I can approve administratively if it hits a certain threshold, even if it's a relatively benign request, just like this one is, it does require you to approve it. It's sort of a check and balance on, the power hungry planning director approving things willy-nilly.
Well, If nobody else has any, if nobody else had any questions for the petitioner, I move that we approve.
Well,
Oh.
I have one question.
Oh,
please.
Public comment.
for you,
Oh,
Dale.
that's right.
Now, as far as the permeability of that parking lot, so not to get real technical, but is it going to be graded as such? Let's say that the asphalt eventually silts in and fills up. I don't know if there's any kind of maintenance program with the town of Avon as far as that goes to allow that porous
So there's
material?
maintenance provisions that are imposed on the owner, but not that ties the town to having to, it's private property, so the town isn't responsible for maintaining it. Your question is, well, if these areas if they would happen to get plugged up, would it still drain?
Yeah, exactly,
The
yeah.
answer is yes.
Okay, good. That was my main question. So if the porous material is no longer porous and it flows
Still drain.
to the channel, okay, good.
So this area right here is, I'm going to use the word normal, but this area right here is asphalt like you normally see it.
Uh-huh, right,
So, and these are pitched to drain.
okay.
So if that were to happen, it would still get to the center aisle.
All right, that was my main question. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I think we have
Public comment.
public comment.
Public comment, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Appreciate that.
Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak to this petition? Seeing none? That's it. I mean, there's no need for rebuttal if there's no remonstrators.
I move that we approve DPRA 2119 Aldridge Dental Parking Lot Expansion, subject to the following conditions. 1, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. 2, a landscape bond is required per section 4-9 of the zoning ordinance. This bond must be provided to the town of Avon prior to the issuance of a full certificate of occupancy for the subject site. And 3, the development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, Fire Department, Crossroad engineers at the pre-construction meeting.
I'll second.
Kathy Ransford,
4.
Paul Gutenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Brent Niemeyer,
4.
Ed Rosenbaum.
4.
That is 5-0. Motion is approved and the development plan has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, do you need your? You're right, though. All right, final item on the agenda under the next item on the agenda under new business, ZA 2109, 530 South County Road 800 East rezoning. This is a request to rezone from R2 to AG, and it's a 0.92 acre property located at 530 South County Road 800 East. This is a requested down zone a piece of property. It's going to, I'm sure that's sort of a head scratcher. Why would you down zone a piece of property from R2 to AG? But it's to allow the property to be used for equestrian activities. The petitioner seeks to board 2 horses for personal use on the property. The equestrian activity is considered animal husbandry and meets the definition of agriculture in the zoning ordinance. Agriculture is permitted in the AG primary zoning district and the AGO secondary zoning district. This property is in neither one of those. And the use is permitted by special exception E1 and R1. But this property is zoned R2, therefore it's not permitted as a use. The petitioner has chosen to rezone the property into the AG zoning district to permit the use by right. So there's the location of the property generally up there. The request to rezone in order to keep 2 horses. We've gone through that. We did do some research. It doesn't look like, there's some structures on the property, so clearly the property has been used for animal husbandry in the past. But it hasn't been done in the recent past, so it's lost its legally established non-conforming use if it had it. The main concern with the proposal from the point of view of the staff is the small size of the property. It's about 92 hundredths of an acre, just under an acre. A general rule of thumb for animal husbandry for our large animals like cattle and horses is you need about 1.5 acres per animal. or an acre and a half for the first animal and an acre every animal above that. So, and I'm not, you'll see that our recommendation is favorable with some commitments, but the keeping of 2 horses then as a rule of thumb would generally require about a 2.5 acre site, which is approximately an acre and a half larger than the property is. So what does that mean? Well, the property would be insufficient to naturally forage the 2 animals. So the animal's diet is going to have to be augmented with other, hay and oats and other sorts of things. This is a typical thing that people who keep horses do. I wouldn't anticipate that she's going to let the animals starve on her property, but I have seen that happen in the past. So it may be challenging during times of inclement weather to keep ground cover on the site. And the collection and disposal of waste from the animals may be challenging long term. So as a caution, we do say the petitioner should exercise care to ensure that the accessory land use doesn't adversely impact the well and septic system that the property uses for their waste and drinking water. And so there are some cautions. It's just a matter of the size of the property and the petitioner's desired accessory use on the property. This is the property as it sits right now. This right here is clearly a structure that was used at one point or another for some sort of animal use. And so it is clear that the property has been used for this in the past. It's just lost its legal non-conforming use. We do recommend that the Plan Commission forward this with a favorable recommendation. We're a bit reluctant to do that, but we do have our reservations are solely on the small size of the property and the intended land use. Our recommendation is subject to 3 conditions or actually 3 commitments that are being made and recorded with the property, and that one of those is no more than 2 horses shall be maintained on the property. We want to specify, because agriculture is in itself considered in the ordinance a primary use of the property. We want to make sure that the agricultural use of this property is always considered an accessory use to the primary use of the property for single-family residential purposes. So we suggest that the use of the property for equestrian activities, that be made explicit as a commitment, that the use of the property for equestrian activities shall be considered accessory to the use of the property for single-family residential purposes, and therefore the 2 horses permitted shall be owned and maintained by the tenant of the property. Houses, yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's been a long night. So the 2 horses shall be owned and maintained by the tenant of the single-family dwelling on the site, and that if in the event that manure or compost piles are being used for the I guess the diminution or the taking care of the animal waste in the property, that they be not located closer to 50 feet from the southern property boundary, because that's another existing single-family dwelling, and then the western property as well. If you look at the overall site, you'll see that it is undeveloped largely around it. So I think that west of the site could eventually become some sort of single-family residential subdivision. So that was the rationale from the staff of keeping any sort of compost piles or manure piles away from the western property boundary. And the southern property, as you see up there, is an existing single-family dwelling. I've probably talked enough about that. This is the staff's recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, I guess my question is why, you've made it clear that the staff was reluctant to give this a favorable recommendation, and the parcel size is less than half of what is normally recommended. So why has the staff decided to go ahead and go forward with a favorable recommendation on this?
Because I think the petitioner, so I grew up in a rural area, and I've seen horses kept on small paddocks and not fed, and they starve to death. But I don't believe that this petitioner is going to do that. I believe the petitioner is going to want to keep these horses fed and other sorts of things. So,
But why would we, well, that kind of piggybacks with another question. We're changing the zoning as opposed to asking for a waiver from the zoning?
well, it'll be a use variance.
Would be a use variance.
Yeah, it would be a use variance on it. And so the Board of Zoning Appeals would have to make the determination that it meets the 5 standards for a use variance. I think.
Says
that-
we're rezoning it.
Right. I think your question is that why not, instead of rezoning the property to ag, why not seek a variance to do it?
Correct.
And that is an option. That was definitely an option.
Because my concern is that once we've rezoned, we've rezoned.
Right.
And then when the property gets sold at some point in the future, which it will, whether it's 10 years or 50 years from now, whatever, it'll get sold, then we're going to be visiting of course, I'll be dead, but, I guess I'm just, is there a preference for rezoning versus going about it another way?
If you're asking the staff,
It's up to the petitioner.
yeah.
And remember, this is a down zone. This is really different. Usually someone wants a more intense use. So they upzone. When they're in this situation, this is a down zone. So they're saying they want a less intensive use standard on their property. That's unusual. And then remember, the petitioner has the right to choose their option. So they can say, I want to rezone, or I want to get a use variance from the BZA. And the reasons that one might choose to do a down zone in this situation is because the standard is, what are these 5 criteria that you always deal with, right?
Mhm.
If they go for a use variance at the BZA, that is one of the most difficult standards to overcome in the whole world of planning and zoning. Okay, that's the hardest one to get, and you have to show all kinds of things that you don't have to show. So if the petitioner believes that they can satisfy the 5 criteria, the rezone, it's a lot easier. Now, from our perspective, those 5 criteria are golden, right? We trust those. And so our job, we really shouldn't even ask the question, why are they not at the BZA? It's not our question.
Mhm.
Petitioner can choose, so they've chosen. So here we are. So it's just a rezone. Now it's a down zone, which is unusual. I can't remember ever having one. It's a down zone. And the other thing I would say is, although Bill talks about a standard, and I grew up in farm country, so I'm sensitive to this too, but the town doesn't have a standard that says you need so many acres per animal. We could do so. I have one client that has a whole chapter on equestrian issues. Okay, we could do that. We don't have that. Bill is saying that when trying to make a recommendation to you based upon responsible growth and development factor number 5, he wanted to get some guidance as to what people do. And I think what Bill's trying to say, and you say it in your report, so if I don't say it right, you kick me, but I think what he's saying is that you can raise animals on smaller lots. It requires more labor, more money, more attention. Okay, you have to bring feed in. You have to be really attentive to those animals. This is not just running, horses wild. Most people who have horses are a significant investment. They pay a lot of attention to them. So what he says in his report to you is the reason he is doing that, he really has a level of trust with this petitioner that they understand that and they can do that. I think that's what I hear you.
So the
Yeah.
1.5 is based on best practices in owning horses, not on anything the town has in place.
Right, that's what I want to make sure. You're not being asked to deviate from a town standard.
Okay,
Or
okay.
anything that's been adopted by anyone. But of course, I applaud Bill for trying to get some sense of proportionality here. But really, whether 0.92 acres is enough to raise 2 horses, Well, it has to do with who's taking care of the horse.
Right.
Because you know what, 100 acres wouldn't necessarily be the right answer either if they're not going to
I
take care
lived
of
in
the animal.
Arizona and
So
there
you
were
can go the other
people
way, right?
who had horses in a backyard that was a quarter the size of this room. So, yeah,
Because I would just remember, it's a rezone case. You have 5 criteria.
okay.
Keep focused on that and make a recommendation.
Yeah, I didn't want to muddy the waters on it too much. It was just, you see downzoning so rarely in this business that it usually causes you to scratch your head. Why are we downzoning this property? And I wanted to make sure that you knew why you were downzoning the property and maybe some of the issues associated with downzoning the property that could come up. But then I have faith that this petitioner is going to take care of their animals properly. So I that's why I'm reluctant to do it, only in the fact that, you know, if somebody in the future chooses, you know, I've seen horses that have been neglected long-term, and it's not a pretty sight.
Mm-mm.
So is there structure on, is there a barn or a shed or anything on the
Yeah,
property?
there's a little stable on the property.
Well, it looked like the green line went right through the middle of the structure on your picture, which I didn't understand.
That's the beacon site. The property boundaries you got to remember on the beacon site that they were geo-referenced off 3 foot by 3 foot pixels. So 6 feet is the best you're ever going to get on the beacon site as far as it's being useful or at least accurate. But you're right. The beacon site shows a line going through there, but I'm fairly certain that's on their
Okay.
property.
So is this, do they own, maybe I'm asking questions I don't need, you can't answer, but do they own the property around it? Did
No.
they, so they bought this lot of land,
Yeah, it's a single family dwelling. It's a legacy. It's a single family dwelling
they
that's
bought
been
an
there for a
acre,
long
less
time.
than an
And
acre.
they purchased the land specifically so that they could move their horses out of a boarding situation and onto this property. And then when they did the research after they purchased it, they realized that it was improperly zoned. And so then she had to file this petition to get it properly zoned so that she could put the horses on the property.
So they'll have to provide additional feed and
Right, they'll have-
grain and so on to accommodate for the lack of acreage.
Yeah, I mean, the key is on this one is they're putting on 2 horses. The site will be able to accommodate it. Sure, it will be if they're properly cared for.
Yeah.
That's
If they're
not, an
properly-
acre's not much though, for 2 horses. Because I remember going on north on Brownsburg, those stables and that little horse farm they had there, and those horses eat that acreage down pretty quick. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask, so if they are not healthy or and so on, is it the Humane Society through the county that would monitor that? Or does the town?
Probably
have
the
any-
animal control, probably county animal control, yeah, would monitor it.
That's a county issue. The county has a health ordinance. There's state law that regulates all that.
I don't believe you're going to have that problem with this case.
Right.
And again, what's our job? Land use.
Yeah, but
Right,
I got a
right,
question on this
Okay.
one, Bill, because
Land use.
we're making a decision, setting
We're
the
not
horses
making a-
aside.
You're not making a decision.
We're making a recommendation on forwarding a recommendation to the council for zoning change that will supposedly live past the current owners. So I'm looking at,
Right.
setting the horses aside and the current people you're looking at, I appreciate that. But it's like, we're saying down zone to ag in an R2 area. And I think to the point you made here is like, it's R2, there's no overt recommendation in the comp plan, so the assumption is it should be R2. So why would we have a unicorn of a zoning in the middle of R2? It's all R2 around that, and it's on Dan Jones, which would see future development there as we're seeing it, but it's all residential. And so, I mean, I got a lot of questions for the petitioner around how they would manage that land.
Yeah, I mean, the zoning is residential. The land use pattern out here is largely agricultural, other than these 2 properties. I would anticipate it would, at least to the north, it's going to stay agriculture, because I doubt if CSX is going to want, they probably like to lease that property, but.
So they got the railroad to the north of them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the property to the north of them is owned by the railroad.
So it's probably not going to be developed.
No.
It's not going to be developed.
So what's the access roads to the property? What roads are adjacent to the property then?
To this property,
Yeah.
just the main road up front.
Which is, what road's that?
Oh, jeez. Yeah,
Dan
800.
100? Okay.
Is that Dan Jones Road?
I believe it's Dan Jones. Yeah, I always get that confused. That's why I was hemming and hawing.
It's right across from that strip mall.
So is this by Misty Eyes then, by the dog place? Okay, so it's north of Misty Eyes then, is that where, I'm just trying to get in my head, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for this one. So the land is just north of Misty Eyes, a bit south of the railroad. So it's to the west of Dan Jones.
But concerning future development, remember, the petitioner is requesting to go to from R2 to the least intense land use, zoning classification, which would mean that in the future, to have it be something other than ag requires another rezone, even if it's residential development. R1 would require rezone, R2, R3, commercial, industrial, whatever. That's why down zones are so unique, because it removes some of the things you can do with your property. So this is, I mean, keep that in mind when you, like two of you have already mentioned, well, I wonder what they're gonna do in the future. This request limits what can be done in the future without town council approval by taking it to an ag zoning. That's really unusual. A lot of people want to keep their zoning the same when they want a variance or a special exception because they want to retain that base zoning. In general, municipalities like down zoning. Okay, we like that. Okay, less intense, have to come back through us to do anything other than ag. So that's in terms of this future development issue, down zoning is thought to give the municipality more control of the future rather than what it is now. So just keep that in mind. You don't have, I can't recall you having a down zone, I'll just say. It's very unusual, but just keep that in
What are
mind.
the other permitted uses for agricultural? So if it's zoned ag, then other than keeping horses, there's other things that could be done on the property, right? Chickens, farm animals, pardon?
They can do 5 chickens.
Can already do that.
Or chickens if in ag, right? You're not limited to 5 in agricultural.
No, you wouldn't necessarily be limited to it, no.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the permitted uses are different in agricultural. So we have to remember that it's not just horses. While the petitioner is asking it for the horses, that I understand about down zoning.
I just said they're less intense.
Yes.
I didn't say they're the same or better. I just said less intense.
Yeah, there's
And on the use spectrum, we talked about training, right? You got ag over here, industrial over here, and everything else in between. I'm just saying it's less intense.
So will the expansion of Dan Jones make the property any smaller because we talked about the Misty Eyes when the parking lot that it was going to cut into their property some, will the expansion of Dan Jones make this less than an acre? Even less than an acre?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a possibility. The town could, ask for or get right away for the expansion, but I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I didn't even think to look.
Because then you're getting a even smaller parcel of land. I assume they posted the sign and sent letters out to all the neighbors?
Yes.
And there was no
No one
No
called or
complaints?
no one commented, no one asked the town.
No rep from CSX.
Nope. Petitioners. Time.
Petitioner?
Hi, I'm Corinne France. I am the property owner at 530 South County Road 800 East. So it's actually 2 parcels of land next to each other, so we own both of them. So it's closer to 2 acres, not less than 1. So you see how it's like the blue square? We also own the one south of that. So the back field would actually be, the field itself would be over an acre. And I actually have a horse with diabetes, so it can't be on a lot of grass, so I need a small lot. And that's kind of the reason for this property.
You say you have a horse with diabetes? and
Yeah,
you
so
can't-
she has to be on a dry lot and fed dry hay and special feed. So currently I'm spending around $550 a month to board her. So it'd be a lot cheaper if I could move her to my place and still keep that quality of care that she needs.
Is there a reason why you didn't ask for the partial south of it also to be part, to be?
I believe I did,
You believe you did?
yes.
I'm just checking that.
So you think you've done it for 2 acres, not 1 acre?
Closer to, I think it's like 1.9 when you add it together,
Okay, so
1.8,
figure that. I mean, I think that's kind of, that'll make me feel better. Okay.
yes,
It's okay. That makes me feel a little better.
yes. Because the house technically goes onto the other one. It's labeled as 2, but it's actually one house,
So
one
that,
garage.
so there's actually two,
There's actually 2 acres, that's my.
two plotted
Mhm.
Yeah, those 2 lots.
Lots.
Those lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made an assumption.
are included in this? Okay.
And so you have a barn on it?
Mhm. And actually, we bought it and it still has horse tack in it. So I wasn't expecting for there to be any issue until I went to apply for a fence, for the woven wire fence, and you can't do woven wire fencing on a residentially zoned. And then that's when I discovered the horses. So I actually bought this place, paying more than what was previously in rent, in intention of getting rid of my horse boarding and having the responsibility of it.
So the fence is not up yet, or did you go ahead and put the fence up?
No, I have to still apply for the fence this spring if this gets passed, which is another expensive process after doing this expensive process, and then pay for the fencing to get installed.
Are you aware of the Dan Jones expansion? Have you heard
Yes,
of that?
I am.
So did that give you any concern?
So the house luckily is set really far back off the road. It's kind of a more of a secluded, quiet house. So they are taking a portion of the front yard to expand it, but most of it is still kind of that green space in the yard. So I think, I want to say the road comes in maybe 5 feet, and then there's going to be a walkway. But as far as this, like, setting of the house, not a lot.
Do you live there at the house?
Mhm.
That's where you're living? Okay.
Yep. So compost is actually a very desirable product. A lot of people will pay for it. So it's really easy, especially if you upkeep it and you don't have a trashy place with like plastic buckets and stuff are getting into it, to actually have it as a desirable product to where it's in demand. A lot of people like it for their garden, so I don't really expect much of an issue.
Do you dry your horse compost?
So usually you let it sit for like a month and then someone comes, picks it up. I currently pay to board them? No.
Yeah, they're not on the.
Yes. Prior to that, I had them at a family's residence, and that's what we did.
Is Misty Eyes just south of you?
Mhm,
You butt
so-
up against you butt up against Misty.
Not quite there. So south of that is a little rectangular grass pasture, and then south of that is a trailer house. And south of that is when you get to Misty Eyes.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Could do public comment?
Public comment, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Anybody
guys.
in the audience want to speak against the petition? Seeing none?
I move that we forward ZA 2109, France rezoning, 530 South County Road 800 East. A request to rezone approximately, how many acres? That should be amended, correct?
Yeah, that should be amended. It should have been
9.
A request to rezone approximately 1.92 acres from R2 to the AG classification to the town council with a favorable recommendation, subject to proposed PUD ordinance and to the following commitment. 1, no more than 2 horses shall be maintained on the property. 2, the use of the property for equestrian activities shall be considered accessory to the use of the property for single-family residential purposes. Therefore, the 2 horses permitted shall be owned and maintained by the tenant of the single-family dwelling on site. And 3, manure and/or compost piles shall be no closer than 50 feet from the southern and western property boundaries.
I'll second.
Captain Ransford,
4,
Paul Hookenberg,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Grant Neemeyer,
4.
Ed Rosenbaum.
4.
It's been forwarded to the town council with a favorable recommendation. The council, I'll probably certify it to the council tomorrow or the next day. It's probably going to be in January when the council will hear it.
is that it?
Is that it?
Any other business to come before the plan commission? No other business? All right.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.